Chapter 322. The other battlefield was a battle between two ladies and a brainwashed killer crocodile. The ugly girl was very unlucky as she parachuted into the river in the city. Before she could understand what was going on, she was suddenly attacked by the killer crocodile. However, the ugly girl's skills were not bad. With some enhancements, she stuffed the killer crocodile's mouth with her bat and pulled the trigger with her pistol. The killer crocodile was much taller than when Thea first saw him. His atavism was even more obvious. It was impossible to tell that this guy used to be human. After being shot several times, he went crazy. He grabbed the ugly girl's arm and wanted to throw her to death. Fortunately, the Japanese woman, Katana, arrived at the critical moment. She used her skillful martial arts to save the ugly girl. The two of them supported the killer crocodile. Looks like they've all entered the battle. Am I the only one left? Thea muttered to herself as she flew up. She quickly approached the city center square. Unsurprisingly, the charm witch and the vengeful demon were there. You again. The government's lackey. Seeing Thea again, the charm witch immediately recognized her from her aura. It's a good blend. His American English is really good, Thea said playfully. She only had a quick glance when she rescued the minister last time. Now she had the time to take a closer look. The exact process was unknown, but the scene could still be guessed. Dr. Jean Munn's body couldn't withstand absolute zero, and the enchantress had magic power but no body. In their moment of despair, the two completed a deep level of fusion. This was a comprehensive fusion of mind, body, and soul, and there was no longer any distinction between them. It was probably because of this that Rick Flegg finally made the decision to tread the path of treason for his lover. It could be said that the original Dr. Joan Munn and the charm which no longer existed. Now, standing in front of Thea was a new enemy with the personality of the charm witch. After regaining her body, the charm witch's spellcasting ability was finally restored. Moreover, with a body, she could continuously absorb new mana from her surroundings, no longer having less mana than before. However, in order to prevent Dr. Joan Munn's body from freezing to death, the charm witch had to cut off more than half of her magic power that was not compatible with Joan Munn's. Her current strength was less than 50% of her peak. Laugh all you want. You won't be able to laugh in a moment. The enchantress glared at Thea and turned back to continue her spellcasting. Was this guy joking? Thea took a closer look. There were a large number of unconscious citizens piled up in front of the charm witch. At a glance, there were at least tens of thousands of people. The charm witch was chanting a language that Thea could not understand. Transparent tentacles were constantly reaching into the bodies of the citizens, bringing a large amount of blood back to the charm witch. It seems to be a spell to increase the potential of one's bloodline. Thea had never seen this spell before, but she could still see the principle behind it. It was similar to the process she used to purify Damien's blood and extract magic power from it. However, the charm witch didn't want to extract magic power. She wanted to improve her body's magic affinity through a large amount of blood infusion, purification, and acquired enhancement. Originally, Dr. Joan Munn had no physical fitness, and she used this bloody method to artificially create a magic physique. It must have been hard on her to go through so much trouble. Thea somewhat sympathized with her, but she still had to fight. Thea pulled out the frost gun and pulled the trigger at the charm witch. If she was a hero of justice, she would have shouted a few nonsense words like "put down your weapon and resist." But Thea did not have such a problem. The refrigerant and the ultra-low temperature reactor quickly operated, and a large amount of frozen gas was spewed out. Stop her! The charm witch shouted at Chatter Santana, the vengeful demon covered in tattoos. It was obvious that Chatter Santana was not brainwashed by her. His eyes were full of helplessness, but he still stepped forward. His hands were on fire, and he resisted Thea's frozen gas. His dark black flames were indeed extraordinary. For a moment, they were on par with the frozen gas. I don't want to be your enemy. I just want to see my family again. Although the flames and the frozen gas were on par, Thea's was a technological weapon. She did not consume any of her own energy. Chatter Santana was using his own energy. Every bit of energy had to go through the circulation of his body. In less than a minute, the temperature of his flames was not as hot as before. Stop resisting. We will help you. This guy is killing innocent people. Can't you see? Thea did not know what the charm witch said to him. She was trying to pull him back to her side. This Chatter Santana was not blind. Other than the fact that the charm witch was a little cleaner, it was no different from a blood sacrifice in the movies. Think of your family that you killed. When I recover my power, I will let you see them again. The charm witch, who had regained her body, was not as quiet as before. Thea was talking about the morality of the masses, but she was talking about personal interests. Chatter Santana thought about it and finally made up his mind. He said to Thea, "Sorry, I have to stop you." What a joke. Do you think you can stop me with the power of that low-level demon? Thea raised her eyebrows. She believed the words of the 3 palace demons, but the nameless demon in Chatter Santana's body was not enough. I will show you what a demon is. A former gangster and an African black witch who had been sealed for hundreds of years. Thea was ready to show them a real demon. The yellow light ring operated at full power. A large amount of fear was manifested by the yellow light ring. The square was shrouded in thick, dark yellow smoke. Both the charm witch and the vengeful demon focused their gazes on it. When the smoke dissipated, the first thing they saw was its demonic aura. It had a pair of curved horns that resembled a ram's, and its eyes were filled with a terrifying aura of fear. There seemed to be sulfur dripping from its mouth. With a wrist blade on its slender arms, the demon seemed to be very dissatisfied with the smoke. It pushed both of its hands to the sides, and the smoke instantly dissipated. The demon slowly walked out, its inverted hooves stomping on the ground. Its huge tail kept whipping around, it seemed to be very dissatisfied with the environment. "Hey!" Thea exclaimed softly. She wanted to manifest the muscular version of Diawolo, but it seemed that because Thea was a woman, the slender female version of Diawolo appeared instead. However, using fear to manifest the Dreadlord was a perfect match. She felt as if she could command her own arm. The two complemented each other, and Sia even felt that her understanding of fear had deepened again. This was incredible. Her understanding of fear was already unparalleled, and now it seemed to have gone further. How could she not be surprised? Chapter 323. Thea flew into the demon god's body. The two of them blended together as if they had always been one. She didn't need to be so tall to deal with these two guys. She compressed all her energy and used it to materialize the details. Every line and every muscle on the demon god's body was vivid and lifelike. The demon god's 10-meter-tall body took a step forward. The huge force caused the ground within a mile to tremble. Roar. The demon god seemed to be venting its satisfaction. It spread its arms and roared at the sky. Heat waves spread in all directions. The temperature in the square rose rapidly. The moisture in the air evaporated rapidly. Their noses twitched, and they could smell a large amount of burnt sulfur. Many unconscious citizens' hair curled up. What is this? The charm which only felt that the demon god was powerful. The demon god of vengeance, Chatter Santana, had a much deeper feeling. This was a high-level demon from hell. As for how powerful it was, it could be judged from the trembling demon in its body. You ungrateful thing. Who gave you the courage to play with fire in front of me? I'll let you see the real fire of hell. Thea's voice came out of the demon god's mouth. The originally beautiful and crisp voice sounded like it had been sawed by a saw. Every word was accompanied by a special noise. Fire tornado. The ferocious demon god crossed its arms and gathered a large amount of emotional energy. Thea, whose magic power had increased greatly, injected a large amount of fire and wind magic power into it. Injecting her magic power into the emotional energy was like throwing a match into a pot of oil. The two different magic powers caused the energy to become raging and uncontrollable instantly. The demon god opened its mouth and revealed a terrifying smile. It held the energy ball with one hand and threw it at the charm witch who couldn't move. As if to intimidate them, Thea didn't throw it very quickly. After the energy ball came into contact with the debris, it quickly expanded thousands of times and started to spin at high speed. The debris in the square was sucked into the center of the vortex, which increased the speed of the fire tornado's formation. In less than 3 seconds, a fiery red tornado that was 100 meters tall and more than 10 meters in diameter had already formed. As the number of objects increased, the centrifugal force increased. The tornado's diameter grew from 20 meters to 30 meters, as if there was no end to it, and it rushed towards the two of them. Stop her. Attack her. The charming witch was starting to lose her sense of propriety. She had mixed up the meaning of her words. Perhaps she didn't know what to do. The former gangster, Chata Santana, was much calmer than her. He secretly despised the African antique. He suppressed the demon in his body that was trying to escape. At the same time, his eyes and mouth were burning. He shouted, and a 3-meter-tall flaming demon appeared. The demon clenched its fists and stood in front of the charm witch, as if it wanted to take on the fire tornado with its own strength. Idiot! Thea snorted at his actions. She could tell that this guy had never studied the demon transformation at all just by looking at the energy that was leaking out of him. He wanted to rely on the body of a mortal to carry the power of hell. What a dream! If it was that simple, why did the ancient sorcerers study magic? They could just catch a demon and stuff it into their bodies. Not only could this guy not control the energy that was leaking out of his body, but he also wanted to use the demon transformation to resist the fire tornado. Thea didn't know what to say. Even Thea, the caster, couldn't control the fire tornado now, let alone him. The demon's spells had always been like this. They never cared about the consequences, and only used as much power as they could. As for the destruction of the environment and other problems, it was not in their dictionary at all. The ignorant and fearless Chata Santana was now standing bravely in front of the fiery red tornado that was hundreds of meters tall and had a diameter that he couldn't see the end of. At this moment, he suddenly realized a problem. His cultural knowledge had never taught him how to withstand a tornado. It was too late to go back and ask the teachers at school now. He could only stand firmly on the ground and muster up all the mana in his body to resist the tornado. Thea, who had conjured Diawolo, saw this scene through the eyes of the demon god and almost laughed out loud. This guy was holding up the sky with both hands. No matter how she looked at it, it was stupid. Then, while she was gloating, Chata Santana was instantly sucked into the tornado. Not only did he not stop the tornado, but his mana also increased the total energy of the tornado to a certain extent. Her external help was of no help at all. The enchantress was faced with a dilemma of two choices: to give up on the civilians on the ground or to resist the tornado head-on. She made the decision quickly. She chose to resist the tornado head-on. She used all the mana in her body to summon a black tornado. However, it turned in the opposite direction of Thea's tornado in an attempt to neutralize part of the wind speed. Then, she set up 3 10-meter-tall and 5-meter-thick earthen walls in front of the tornado. Humph, look down on me. Let me show you something else. Thea did not know why the demon god did not teleport away. Instead, he chose to resist the tornado head-on. This was very illogical. Thea did not know whether this spell could only be used once, or she did not want to give up the blood essence that she had obtained. But she knew that if the demon god did not run away, she could use a more powerful spell. The conjured demon god took a deep breath and absorbed all the energy and emotions in the surrounding air. Countless energy gathered in his mouth. This time, Thea did not hesitate and added her light, dark, fire, and wind attributes into the spell. The demon god first absorbed the energy and leaned back. Then, he suddenly lunged forward and shot out the energy gathered in his mouth in a beam. Red and blue alternately flashed, and a thick lightning bolt more than 2 meters in diameter shot out. This time, the attack was so fast that the enchantress was caught off guard. The lightning breath was released later but arrived first. It surpassed the fire tornado and directly hit the earthen walls erected by the enchantress. This was a guided spell, not a hammer. Thea continued to control the conjured demon god to add new energy to the lightning breath. The lightning beam hit the earthen walls of the enchantress, and the first layer of the wall was instantly penetrated. The enchantress was shocked. She hurriedly poured her mana into the second wall, trying to stabilize the defensive line. However, Thea's total mana was stronger than her, and she also had the demon god to control it. One was a point of damage, and the other was an area of effect defense. There was no need to say which was better. The second wall only lasted for less than 10 seconds before it was penetrated again. The enchantress did not have time to be surprised, because Thea suddenly attacked again, trying to take her down in one blow. "I'll hold her off. You set up the defense." The one who roared was Chatter Santana, who had been swept up into the sky. The enchantress' reverse tornado had some effect. At least, the suction force had weakened a lot. Chatter finally broke free with great effort. As a grasshopper on a rope, he could see that the enchantress could not block it. He could only brace himself to take on Thea's lightning breath. Chapter 324. Facing the red and blue lightning beam from the demon god, Chatter didn't know if he could withstand it. However, he had a strength, or rather, a weakness, and that was his stubbornness. As long as he thought he was right, he would do anything regardless of anyone. He was like this when he was captured by the Sky's Eye Society, and now he was going to block Thea's lightning beam. The loss of demonic power every minute and every second had already made him feel exhausted. He knew that he only had the strength for this one attack. He clenched his fists, bent his knees, and mobilized all the hellfire in his body to rush towards the lightning beam. Bang! There was a loud noise. It was a bit of an exaggeration to say that Chatter blocked the lightning beam for more than a second. His hellfire only slowed down the speed of the lightning beam slightly. After that, it was his body that had to face the lightning breath directly. His palm and wrist were directly vaporized by the huge energy beam. Perhaps the demon in his body sensed the danger and controlled his body to move slightly to the side, saving his life. However, his right arm and shoulder were all blown away, leaving nothing behind. Chatter Santana didn't say a word and directly fainted. The demon in his body was also seriously injured and had to go into hibernation. Fortunately, his brave resistance did consume a lot of the lightning beam's energy, and at the same time, bought time for the charm witch to regroup. This time, she didn't block it directly. Instead, she opened a huge portal in the path of the lightning beam. A huge amount of lightning energy poured in. The charm witch gritted her teeth to maintain the portal so that it wouldn't explode. After a full 5 seconds, the entire lightning beam was transferred away. As for where it was transferred to, she didn't have the time to think about it. The portal can be used like this. Thea had just started on the path of spatial teleportation. Seeing this scene, she couldn't help but admire it. The demon's attack didn't matter. It could be released, but it couldn't be retracted. The lightning breath just now, she could only run, but she couldn't take it head-on. This attack consumed a lot of energy from the demon god. Its original height of 10 meters shrank by half, and it was now only 5 meters. Thea had consumed emotional energy, but she didn't consume much energy. The seductive witch was not in such a good state. She had been maintaining the array beneath her and had been forced to activate the teleportation gate with all her strength. The backlash from the array and the intense consumption of magic power had greatly aggravated the hidden injuries in her body. After all, the original owner of this body, Dr. Jean Munn, did not have a magical constitution. Forcefully using magic like this would cause great damage to the original body. He originally looked like a white man in his 30s, but now he looked like he had aged 20 years. His face was full of wrinkles and his hair was dry and yellow. This was the result of the rejection between the magic power and his body. Suppress her. Thea ordered the materialized demon god in her mind. She pulled out her demon sword and flew to the unconscious Chatter. He stabbed the sword down, but there was no reaction. He stabbed the sword again, but there was still no reaction. Could it be that this sword was ineffective against demons? Thea couldn't help but think this way. These guys who forged the demon swords were quite loyal. Didn't demons fight demons? Thea didn't believe it and stabbed the unconscious Chatter Santana twice more. Only when the unconscious Chatter Santana began to vomit blood did she finally confirm that this sword was ineffective against demons. This also proved why the resourceful ninja master didn't make any progress after holding this sword for hundreds of years. It was because the sword was ineffective against demons, But the ninja master could only come into contact with demons. Thea stopped being depressed. This guy on the ground couldn't do it, but the seductive witch in the distance could, right? She didn't enter the materialized body and diverted part of her mind to control it. She wanted to fight 2 against 1 and kill her quickly, holding the 1.5-meter-long sword in one hand. Thea blessed herself with wind walk. She was as fast as lightning and closed the distance of less than 100 meters in an instant. She held the sword with both hands and slashed at the seductive witch's neck. The seductive witch kept summoning shadow creatures in an attempt to stop the materialized demon god. Some of them were shadow leopards and shadow snakes that Thea could summon herself. There were also many strange creatures that were obviously not from the material world. With a large number of summoned creatures, the seductive witch was able to stall the materialized demon god who had lost half of its strength and had lost Thea's core control. However, facing Thea who was rushing at her, the seductive witch didn't dare to be careless. She summoned 2 long swords from the void and blocked the seductive witch's magic sword. Ever since the battle with the ninja master, Thea had also experienced the power of dual wielding. She had a very aggressive personality and any combination of sword and shield didn't suit her. She changed to holding the sword with one hand and took out the frost gun from the space ring with her left hand. She sprayed it at the seductive witch. Damn! The seductive witch was too familiar with this gun. It could be said that without this gun, she could still hide in Jonemun's body for a few years. She wouldn't have jumped out in such a hurry like now. She hated this gun, but hatred aside, she couldn't just shout and use magic power to kill the enemy. That was the privilege of the protagonist. She didn't have that ability. In the face of the surging cold air, she could use magic power to resist it for a while, but what about after that? After fusing with Jonemun's soul, she also understood that this was a technological society. Jonemun was an archaeologist. She had never seen a frost gun, but she still knew that this weapon consumed the energy of firearms. Using her own magic power to consume the energy of the opponent's technological weapon was a stupid thing to do. The fire tornado in the distance was slowed down by her magic. It wasn't as fast as before, but it was still slowly approaching. The seductive witch didn't have time to think about it. She had no choice but to cut off the connection between herself and the bloodline absorption circle and directly teleported to avoid the cold air. Thea pursued the seductive witch. With the frost gun in her left hand and the magic sword in her right hand, she slashed fiercely at the seductive witch. When she was close, she would slash with her sword. When she was far away, she would hit with her gun. Thea had the upper hand. But she wasn't happy. Instead, she was a little depressed. The magic sword could absorb the seductive witch's magic power. The first few slashes really scared the seductive witch. Her skills were at the level of a kindergarten compared to Thea. She could hit her twice in 3 moves. When the sword slashed her body, her HP and magic power would drop. No one could withstand it. But after Thea absorbed a little, she artificially released the magic power. This was because the magic power was not only different from her own magic power, but also had different characteristics. Although they were both of the dark attribute, there were too many impurities and it had a death aura. Although in order to obtain power, Thea was almost unrestrained, this kind of energy was too corrosive. If she absorbed too much of it, she would be like the seductive witch in the beginning. Her unkempt hair and dirty face were a vivid portrayal. She could play the role of a necromancer without makeup. Anyone who looked at her appearance would know that she was a villain. Thea didn't have to absorb this energy. If she didn't, she would die. Without thinking much, she directly expelled the energy from her body. Regretfully, she put away the magic sword and replaced it with the Godslayer. Chapter 325. She thought it would be a sumptuous meal, but it turned out to be poisoned. There was no need to mention how frustrated Sia was. She poured fire magic into the Godslayer and slashed at the charm witch. The enchanted witch did not know that she was being despised. She was surprised to see Thea put away her magic sword, but when she saw Thea pull out a fiery red longsword, she had no time to think. The two of them exchanged another 7 or 8 blows. The charm witch's martial arts were mediocre, but her teleportation truly lived up to its name. She no longer had to rely on her scattered magic power to teleport. Now that she had regained her body, she could teleport anywhere she saw with almost zero consumption of magic power. Clang! There was a loud noise. The demon god released a large ring of fire around himself and destroyed all the shadow creatures in one blow. He strode over to help the enchanted witch. The enchanted witch was no match for Thea, let alone this demon made of unknown materials. She hurriedly dodged Thea's sword, but she was met with the demon god's tail full of bone spikes. Slap! There was a crisp sound, and the huge force slapped her face out of shape. She was in midair, and her mind went blank. Thea took advantage of this rare opportunity to stab her in the back and out the front. The enchanted witch teleported 3 times in a row, dodging Thea's follow-up attack. She was half kneeling on the ground, her hands supporting her body as she vomited mouthfuls of black blood. She was not Ars, a parallax demon, who could use energy to heal her damaged body. She had never suffered such a serious injury in the past few hundred years. The fire magic attached to the Godslayer was also constantly eroding her body, destroying the magic circulation in her body. She covered her wound and stared at Thea with her green eyes. Just when Thea thought she was preparing for a big move, she saw the enchanted witch disappear in front of her like smoke. Teleportation again? Thea soon found that the enchanted witch did not appear around her. She had run away. She opened the Eye of Horus and followed the direction where the opponent's magic had disappeared. Soon, she found the figure of the enchantress 2 kilometers away. The injury from the previous sword strike was far more serious than she had imagined. The broken magic cycle had caused her to be unable to teleport. The enchantress was also aware of this problem. Although she did not have a long-range vision like the Eye of Horus, she was extremely sensitive to magic power. She could sense that Thea was searching for her. Looking at the battlefield around her, she saw that the Archer of Death and Rick Flegg were exchanging fire not far from her. Rick, who originally had 7 or 8 subordinates, was in great pain from the Archer of Death. Although they were also elite soldiers, the Archer of Death's marksmanship was far better than theirs. In less than 10 minutes of exchanging fire, 4 of his subordinates had already been killed. The remaining few, including Rick Flegg, were all struggling to hold on. The enchantress, who had entered the battlefield, quickly judged the situation and was about to teleport to kill the Archer of Death. After that, she could rely on these soldiers to slightly delay Thea's pursuit. After years of mercenary life, the Archer of Death had developed an amazing intuition. Although he did not see any danger, he still rolled forward in advance and dodged the enchantress who had teleported to his side. Realizing that he had been ambushed, he did not even look at who the attacker was. He raised his hands and fired wildly with the silenced pistol on his wrist at the target. The enchantress had finally found some pleasure in torturing noobs. Her heart was indescribably happy. Like a ghost, she flashed left and right around the Archer of Death. In less than 3 seconds, the Archer of Death had been hit twice, and the remaining one was blocked by his wrist guard. You must be very proud of bullying people who don't have magic. Thea finally caught up. Her spatial magic was only at the beginning. She did not care about teleporting others, but she felt that teleporting herself was too dangerous. When they were in the square, Thea saw that the fire tornado was getting closer and closer. Thousands of people were still unconscious in the square. She raised her hand and reversed the direction of the fire tornado, changing the direction of the fire tornado. This spell was very powerful and was very useful against enemies in a large area. However, it was not very effective against single enemies. She would have to use it carefully next time. Thea cancelled the spell and quickly caught up with the Archer of Death. Seeing that the enchantress's knife was only a few centimeters away from the Archer of Death's neck, she raised her hand and slapped it with the magician's hand. Now that her mana was several times stronger than before, this kind of low-level spell could be cast instantly. The invisible giant hand slammed into the Archer of Death's stomach and sent him flying 5 or 6 meters back. Thank you. Can you use more force? The Archer of Death clutched his stomach and staggered to get up. He gritted his teeth and shouted at Thea. This was different from the time when she dealt with the Kartana at the Ministry of Defense. At that time, Thea had held back. This time, she used it on the Archer of Death, which almost broke his intestines. "You're welcome." Thea took advantage of the situation and slashed down with her sword. The enchantress was about to teleport away, but Thea had already targeted her. She did not stop and shot the frost gun at her as if it was free. The enchantress was only halfway through her teleportation when her left hand was frozen. Thea's angle of attack was very tricky. The huge icicle connected her hand to the ground. The enchantress struggled twice but could not break free. Seeing that Thea's frost gun began to hum again, the enchantress knew that there was a problem before the gun could be used. However, this gap was very short, leaving her only a little more than a second to think. She made a prompt decision. She raised the long sword in her right hand and slashed at her left arm. Fart! Her left arm was cut off from the elbow. Fortunately, the blood in her veins was almost frozen, and the wound was very cold. Other than losing an arm, the damage was not great. The enchantress did not dare to look back. She chose to teleport. Damn, that's a lot of determination. Thea was a little impressed. The frost gun's cooldown was only 1 second. It was not easy to make such a decision in such a short time. After all, any damage to her body would be permanent. However, the enemy had escaped under her nose. She had to give chase. Just as she was about to fly away, Rick Flegg tied 4 or 5 grenades together and threw them at her like a madman. He hurriedly conjured a yellow protective shield and withstood the violent explosion. "You're courting death." Thea looked straight at Rick Flegg. This person had betrayed his country for his lover and now he did not even care about his life. There weren't many people who weren't afraid of her intimidating gaze. Rick Flegg was also human, so he was naturally afraid. However, it was unknown if it was because his heart was filled with the feelings he had imagined, but his strong love overcame a portion of his fear, and the rest was withstood by his willpower. Rick Flegg was extremely silent. He raised the M4A1 in his hand and fired at Thea with all his might. Then, he saw the person in yellow raise a finger, and a golden ray of light came closer and closer before his eyes. The yellow light penetrated his skin and skull like a sharp arrow. He did not know anything after that. After killing Rick Flegg in an instant, Thea raised her hand to help him finish off the remaining 2 soldiers who were still firing. She looked around and searched for the enchantress location. She directly rose into the air and chased after her, leaving the Archer of Death clutching his stomach on the ground. Chapter 326. Death Archer looked at Rick Flegg, who was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open, and sighed. This man had fought with him for a long time. Although his marksmanship was not as good as his mind was very flexible. He fought bravely despite being at a disadvantage. From a mercenary's point of view, he was a worthy opponent. But, his excellent marksmanship, battle awareness, and flexible mind did not help him resist the enemy. In the face of the ridiculously strong man in yellow, the other party just moved his finger and turned him into a corpse. He did not even have the chance to use the skills that he had painstakingly trained. He died in a clean way. Sighing, he felt sorry for the opponent he respected, but Death Archer had seen countless people die in front of him in his life. He would not be swayed by such a small matter. He took out his phone and took a few photos to prove that he was the one who killed this person, so that he could go back and collect the money. He had the same thoughts as Death Knell, especially after seeing Thea's tyrannical strength. He was even more certain that he was just a bystander. Now that he had a battle record, he could go back and collect the money. Just as he was about to leave, he inadvertently saw the left arm that the charm witch had cut off. The frost gun was very efficient. The broken arm in the ice was still emitting wisps of black gas, which were especially obvious in the transparent ice. Take it away. He had not decided whether to keep it as a trophy or hand it over to the Heaven's Eye Society, but it was not wrong to take it back. Not to mention how Death Archer took the broken arm out of the ice, Thea was desperately blocked by Rick Flegg, so this time it took her longer to catch up. Unfortunately, Rick Flegg's sacrifice did not have much meaning. The Charm Witch's strength was greatly reduced, and she could no longer maintain a high frequency of spatial teleportation. The distance she teleported was getting shorter and shorter, and the interval between teleportations was getting longer and longer. She consumed a lot of her physical strength and magic power. She knew that Thea was chasing after her, but she had to stop and rest every time she teleported. Damn it! The charming witch rested for less than 10 seconds before Thea caught up with her. The two of them fought and stopped. Thea was basically in perfect condition, but the other party was less than 30% of her peak condition. The more she witnessed it, the more secrets of the charm witch's teleportation were exposed. In Thea's eyes, although her spells were more inclined towards witchcraft and Thea's were magic, they were different paths to the same goal. She believed that after this battle, Thea's spatial magic would reach a new level. Who told you to run? Run. Thea was no longer fighting her in close combat. Her teleportation ability was truly unpredictable. Fighting her in close combat was a waste of time. The frost spear's firing speed was not fast enough. The best weapon to deal with her was a divine longbow paired with light elemental magic arrows. Flying 20 meters above the ground, Thea drew her bow and shot an arrow as soon as she showed her head. At this moment, Thea was reminded of the time when she rode a skateboard across Gotham. Boom! Clang! The sound came one after another. The path they took seemed to have been bombed, and the ground was full of craters. Presumably, the city's reconstruction in the future would be another business for the Quinn Group. Damn rat, you're dead. Thea was very happy with her shooting. Suddenly, she realized a problem. Her opponent was now a woman who had done many evil things. It was completely in line with the teachings of the goddess of the hunt and the requirements of the arrow of vengeance. Unlike the last time when she was beaten up by ours, she had to accumulate divine power to take revenge. This time, it was a one-sided beating. It was more likely that the charm witch would take revenge on her. The ability to accumulate divine power could not be used. It was purely to fulfill the teachings of the goddess of the hunt and take revenge on the evil woman who lost her virginity. Hee hee. Thea took out the only 2 crimson arrows in her quiver. This arrow was half the length of an ordinary arrow and required the bow to be fully drawn. As long as the target was locked on, it would automatically track and hit the target. Ours was able to split half of his divine power to create a clone and deceive the divine arrow. You, an African native, can't do that, right? When the bowstring was fully drawn, Thea used the Eye of Horus to lock onto the charm witch who was about to escape the city. She pointed the bow at the sky and silently recited the goddess prayer. The face of the charm witch appeared in her mind. It's her, she must die. As this thought came to her mind, the arrow of vengeance seemed to sense her strong desire to fight. The originally ordinary arrow shaft was surrounded by a cloud of red mist, and countless profound runes appeared on the arrowhead. Thea just glanced at it and stopped looking. This knowledge was not something she could grasp at the moment. This was the same as the arrow and Diana's lasso of truth. It was a creation of laws above divine power and could not be replicated. Die. Thea roared and released the bowstring with her right hand. The crimson arrow drew a beautiful arc and shot into the distance. The air, the earth, and the river seemed to resonate with the word die. All intelligent creatures, including birds, beasts, and insects, received the warning in their hearts. The weak ones crawled on the ground, while the strong ones looked around nervously. The entire city fell into a temporary silence under the power of the arrow. What the hell? As the strongest intelligent creature in the city, other than Thea, the charm witch was more sensitive to the arrow because the arrow was aimed at her. The silent chill and pure murderous intent mixed together and rushed in the direction of the charm witch. It was clearly a cold and murderous intent, but she did not feel evil here. There was only a simple meaning: I want to kill you, so you must die. The charm witch no longer cared about her injuries. She used her life to teleport several times in a row, trying to avoid the arrow. However, the arrow could also teleport. The distance between the two was rapidly shrinking. The charm witch only felt that she had never been in such a dangerous situation in hundreds of years. This killing intent was unrestrained. It only wanted the target to die, no matter where the target ran to. I won't die. I still have a way. The charm witch spat out an ugly scarecrow from her mouth. The scarecrow was black and looked exactly the same as when Thea first met her. The charm which reached out and dug out one of her eyes, slapped it into the scarecrow's body, and spat a few mouthfuls of black blood on it. She opened a long-distance portal and threw the scarecrow into it. After that, she stared at the arrow nervously. However, she was disappointed. Ars's divine power could deceive the arrow of vengeance, but the level of her witchcraft was much lower. Dolls could usually avoid some fatal attacks, but today, she was not facing magic or divine power, but the power of rules of a higher level. Only the natural order could go against the natural order. The crimson arrow did not know mercy or sympathy. It was the judge and the ultimate executor. Bang! All the intelligent creatures heard the sound of a hammer smashing glass. The enchantress used her body to illustrate the teachings of the goddess of the hunt. The arrow pierced through her chest, but there was no blood or organs in the wound. It was as if the wound was made of air. The charm which blankly covered her wound, but she touched nothing. Her body was rapidly dissipating. Chapter 327. My body. The charming witch wanted to say something, but her body dissipated too quickly. In the blink of an eye, half of her body seemed to have been erased out of thin air. Her mouth made a whimpering sound. She no longer had any vocal organs. She knew that resistance was meaningless, but her life instinct still made her gather the remaining magic to resist this kind of destruction on the level of the rules. But all of this was futile. Before the ink-black magic touched the nothingness, the charming witch felt her sense of touch, hearing, and vision being rapidly stripped away. The cold killing intent had already reached her head. Her soul was unwilling to die just like that. She desperately sent out waves of soul fluctuations, but in the face of the powerful rules, everything was so powerless. When she made up her mind to self-destruct her mana, at least to leave something in this world that could prove that she had been here, her dark elemental mana began to flip and boil, but it was already too late. The power of the natural order swept across, and whatever mana or soul, everything disappeared in the face of the natural order. The earth-shattering explosion did not happen, and the vicious curse before death did not shout out. The charming witch was killed by the arrow of vengeance. Huff! Thea did not feel good shooting this arrow. Revenge required a price, and it also required the strength to match it. It was impossible for a child of a few years old to stab Hera to death with the arrow of vengeance. Artemis was not that powerful. Artifacts were weapons used by gods, and the lowered standard also meant that there was a price to pay for using them. If it were not for the recent increase in her magic power, this arrow would have absorbed her life force. The instant withdrawal of 70% of her magic power, even if her body had been transformed by divine power, was a little difficult to bear. She rested for a while on the spot before she could catch her breath. She flew to the place where the charming witch died and searched the place. This arrow of vengeance was really powerful. There was not even a trace of the witch left. She died so cleanly that there was no trace of her existence. After shooting the arrow of vengeance, Thea did not continue to maintain the Eye of Horus due to the intense magic consumption. She did not see the scene of the charm witch releasing the doll. She rested for a while until she recovered half of her combat power, and then rushed to the other two battlefields. Death Knell and Captain Boomerang's battle was slightly closer to each other. By the time Thea arrived, the battle had already ended. Death Knell's strength was already higher than Captain Boomerang's, and with Captain Boomerang's mind control, he couldn't unleash his full strength. He was constantly being suppressed. Just as Death Knell's longsword was about to cut his neck, the charming witch died, and Captain Boomerang's mind control was released. In the face of Death Knell's fatal blow, the Australian unleashed all of his potential at the critical moment, throwing out his last boomerang before he died. Slade was shocked, but he was helpless as the distance between the two was too close. Even though he was stronger than his opponent, it was useless. He could only tilt his head slightly to avoid the boomerang. The boomerang cut a wound of more than 10 centimeters from his cheekbone to his eye and forehead. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen, and his right eye was blinded. However, Death Knell was also a ruthless person. Even though he was seriously injured, the long sword in his hand did not stop, and he cut off Captain Boomerang's neck. This Australian, who was still somewhat famous in the original timeline, died under Death Knell's sword before he became famous. When Thea arrived, she saw this scene. In the blink of an eye, one was dead and one was injured. Captain Boomerang had lost his life. Death Knell did not know about the mind control, he only felt that he had been suppressing his opponent. However, due to his carelessness, his opponent counterattacked before he died, blinding him in one eye. This made him extremely angry. "I'll help you stabilize your injuries first," Thea said as a white light flashed between her fingers, and the bleeding from Slade's wound slowed down significantly. "You rest first, I'll go to the other battlefield." Of course, Thea could heal him. It was just a matter of regrowing a broken limb. However, this was not the right place, nor was the right time. If the other party was not loyal, there was no need for her to waste her magic power. Slade did not utter a word. He sat on Captain Boomerang's corpse and lowered his head in deep thought. As for what he was thinking, no one knew. The clown woman and the Kartana fought Killer Crocodile together. The battle situation was not out of Thea's expectations. The two women's strength was not bad. Taking advantage of the Charm Witch's death, the mind control disappeared, and Killer Crocodile was stunned. The two women attacked fiercely. Thea rushed to the battlefield and saw the Kartana piercing Killer Crocodile's upper jaw and out of his lower jaw, firmly nailing his mouth to the ground. Then, taking advantage of his violent struggle, the clown woman raised her baseball bat and smashed Killer Crocodile's head. The crazy clown woman only stopped attacking when the specially made baseball bat broke. Killer Crocodile's breathing was weak and he fell into a severe coma. Just as Kartana was about to give him another fatal blow, Amanda finally arrived. "Stop." As her direct subordinate, Kartana was very obedient. She withdrew her Kartana upon hearing her command, and Killer Crocodile's life was saved. "Have the two enemies been dealt with?" Thea slowly landed on the ground. Amanda immediately asked. As soon as Thea said no, she would immediately run. Fortunately, Thea did not disappoint her. "They've been dealt with. The one with fire is most likely still breathing. As for the Charm Witch, she has been completely destroyed." Amanda was very happy that the matter had been resolved perfectly. She immediately ordered her subordinates to clean up the battlefield. Using the excuse of asking about the battle situation, she stopped Thea, a powerful fighter, from leaving. The bodies of the targets were carried out. Captain Boomerang and Rick Flegg's bodies were cold. Amanda sighed at Rick Flegg. She was not sad about his death. She felt sorry for the time she had wasted on Rick Flegg. In order to train a qualified subordinate, she had put in a lot of effort. Now that years of effort had turned into a cold corpse, she still felt sad for a second. "What's this?" A second later, she was attracted by the thing wrapped in Death Shooter's clothes. Their main force had entered too quickly. Death Shooter had just taken his arm out of the ice. There was no way he could hide it, so he had no choice but to hand it over. "That witch's arm. It just seems a little dry. I think it's loss of water." Death Shooter held the thing that looked like a hand bone wrapped in a layer of human skin and explained to Amanda. Amanda did not listen to his explanation. She automatically looked at Thea, the occult expert. Thea used her mental power to feel for a bit. There was still a trace of energy left in the arm, but because the Charm Witch's soul had been destroyed, the magic on the arm dissipated very quickly. "This is the Charm Witch's arm. Since her soul has been destroyed, this arm is useless. Take it back and destroy it," Thea said casually. Amanda thought of something and nodded. She ordered her subordinates to take out a box and put the arm inside. Chapter 328. Thea looked at the scene coldly and didn't stop them. The Sky's Eye Society had a habit of collecting mysterious items everywhere. They had a secret room deep underground called the Black Room. It contained all the supernatural items that could be found in the world, such as the Sun God's Orb, the Spear of Fate, and even Pandora's box that would cause a great war in the future. There were so many good things in there that it was comparable to the treasures of the gods. Although Thea wanted to take a look, the Black Room was heavily guarded. In the past 100 years, mystics had been recruited by the government to add protective spells and barriers. She didn't want to set foot in there unless she was fully prepared. Following the corpse was Chatter Santana, who was on his last breath. Half of his body had been burnt to a crisp by the lightning breath. Amanda frowned at the sight. Was there any value in saving such a person? Fortunately, the Sky's Eye Society had always been extravagant. Although the unconscious Chatter Santana didn't hold Amanda's hand, he still wanted to be treated. Amanda made a decision. No matter what, she had to save him first. She instructed her subordinates to bandage him first before sending him back for treatment. She transferred money to Death Knell and Death Archer. Both of them were mercenaries. Death Knell was missing an eye, while Death Archer offered the remains of his arm. Amanda compensated them with a portion of the originally agreed upon price. They left first. Thea waited for a while and left after seeing that there was nothing else for her to do. Not long after she left, Lara reported to Amanda with a tablet. "Sir, the central square of the city is severely damaged. There are traces of a tornado at the scene. The tornado kept moving from the city center to the northwest corner before finally leaving the city and dissipating. From the square and the tracks along the way, we found more than 1,100 corpses. There are also thousands of people who are unconscious. We can't calculate the number of missing persons at the moment. There are no losses." Amanda waved her hand lightly, indicating that she understood. There were no missiles that bombed the White House or the Pentagon. The citizens' losses were within an acceptable range. Those with corpses would be sent to the city government to express their condolences. Those without corpses would be treated as missing persons. The federal government would send a spokesperson to perform, and the flags would be lowered to half-mast in silence. "Record it. Tell the media that the city's gas pipeline exploded. Isn't there a trace of a tornado? Tell them that the pipeline exploded. That's the truth. Next." Lara recorded silently. She was already used to this kind of life. The female soldier who had fought for the country in Afghanistan had long disappeared. In a market in Massachusetts. 10 minutes ago, many people saw a dark blue door of light. Then, a straw doll fell out of the door. The agent said that the doll looked very similar to the enchanted witch. "Our people are looking for it in the area." Witnesses said that it was taken by a gang. Lara showed the image on the tablet and showed it to Amanda. The image was very blurry, and it was indeed taken in a hurry. The camera was very shaky, but Amanda's attention was immediately captured. "Is this guy not dead?" Thea said that her soul was destroyed. Lara remained silent. These mysterious things were very different from her worldview. "Let's get it first. We'll just wipe out the gang and deal with it according to Article 5 of the Supernatural Affairs Management Ordinance. How's the search of the cave where Dr. Jean Munn fell? We've searched ancient documents and found the key item. It's a green heart. But 10 minutes ago, the person in charge told me that the heart's original vitality was rapidly draining. Now, it's as stiff as a rock." Lara stood straight and reported meticulously. Amanda didn't comment. "Collect them all. This arm, the straw doll, and the heart. Send them back to the headquarters for testing. If there's no sign of life, seal them in the dark room." "Understood. Search for traces of Bronze Tiger. The X-team needs a new leader. Go and do it. I'll leave this to you. I'll go back to Washington." After saying that, Amanda left the scene with a few guards. She had just received news that Steve Trevor was really lucky. He had actually escaped under the noses of more than 30 elite criminal soldiers. Amanda wanted to return to the Department of Defense first and do her best to defame him in front of a few generals with real power. Leaving aside Amanda, who was scheming against Steve, Sia left the people of the Society of the Heavenly Eye and came to a house according to some signs. She pushed the door open and entered. Slade, whose right eye was still bleeding, was waiting for her. He had gauze wrapped around his right eye and was still bleeding. "So, have you thought it through? I can give you power and your lost eye." Thea went straight to the point. "You can hire me to do things." Slade still didn't want to lose his autonomy. The dependent nature of loyalty was too strong, and he didn't like to use it. "Of course I can hire you." Thea paused. Slade's left eye glowed, but Thea's next words made his eyes flicker. "Once you get my power, you'll automatically be loyal to me. This has nothing to do with your subjective behavior. It's the effect of magic. If you think it's a higher, I don't care. It's just a change of words. Thea chuckled. Her laughter was like a demon that bewitched mortals. One was power, and the other was freedom. Which was more important? Slade's forehead was sweating a little. Thea had a lot of things to do at home. She didn't want to waste time with him. She flicked her finger, and a fake yellow light ring fell on the table. This ring is the source of power. I'll give it to you now. If you don't wear it, it'll come back to me in 3 days. Take your time to think about it. After that, Thea disappeared from the room like a puff of smoke, leaving Slade with a solemn expression. Why did she leave just like that? You could have at least persuaded me a little more. Slade stood alone at the corner of the table, looking at the yellow ring. He reached out his hand several times to grab it, but gave up. This kind of invisible psychological pressure was more testing than Thea's persuasion. At least there was no need for him to kneel in front of her face. It made him unconsciously lean toward power. Should he wear it or not? Slade was like a donkey grinding a mill. He walked in circles around the small round table, thinking. Images kept flashing in his mind. There were images of him flying freely, and there were images of him beating up his enemies. In short, each had its own advantages. He couldn't make up his mind at the moment. He took out a bottle of hard liquor from the kitchen, trying to calm himself down. However, the more he drank, the more depressed he became. In a fit of anger, he fell asleep. The man who usually slept soundly amidst the roar of guns and cannons found himself not sleepy at all after lying down for 10 minutes. His blinded right eye was burning with pain. He couldn't fall asleep at all. So what if I die? Come on. He reached out with his thick arm, grabbed the ring, and put it on his right middle finger in a very barbaric manner. Endless amounts of emotional power surged into his heart. Slade Wilson didn't even grunt as he fainted to the ground. Chapter 329. Thea, who had flown a short distance away, naturally felt a magical message. Richard put on the ring and softly chanted a spell to activate the limb recovery spell stored in his ring. With the power of the lamp ring, his eyes would quickly recover, and at the same time, his strength, speed, and endurance would be greatly improved. The lamp ring did not have the ability to materialize, but the emotional power was very compatible with his body and gave him a new ability. As for what it was, he would only know when he woke up. Not long after returning to Star City, Thea gave orders to her subordinates to invest in the Red House laboratory. After some capital maneuvering, a large amount of money was hidden from the board of directors. In the end, the investment was made in the name of a subsidiary company of the group. This was to prevent Lex Luthor and Bruce Wayne from discovering any clues. The group's daily financial transactions were huge. No matter how high their IQ was, they were not God. Sia was also a director of these two groups, and the two groups were also using their funds without her knowledge. She couldn't find out about the other party's fund flow, and similarly, the other party couldn't find out about her. This was a very ridiculous rule of the game. The investment did not mean that the money would be transferred immediately. The preliminary research was still needed. The incident at the Central City's top laboratory was just a few days ago, so Thea could not leave. Moreover, as the chairman of the board, she could not personally go to the non-famous laboratory. Sending a vice president showed that she cared a lot. Remember, look more, talk less, and write down all the valuable things. Thea whispered. Don't worry. Hee hee. The vice president she sent was Miss Felicity Smoker. When the genius hacker heard that she was going to see the alien technology, she was so excited that she did not sleep the whole night. Although she had 2 big dark circles under her eyes, she was still very energetic. Thea was not worried about her. Felicity looked unreliable, but she was actually very smart. When the original space-time Ray Palmer disappeared, she had already stabilized the top management of the Palmer Group. If it were not for Green Arrow's nonsense, she would have been the chairman for a long time. The research team was led by Felicity. It wasn't a large team with only a dozen people. Most of them were legal and financial professionals. Only Felicity, Dr. Hoffman, the former head of product research and development, and Cisco Ramon, who was wearing the Quinn Group's uniform and pretending to be the head of the Applied Science Department, entered the laboratory. Thea was afraid that Felicity wouldn't be able to do much on her own, so she pulled Psycho over and asked him to take a few days off in the central city. He was considered a non-staff member and could help come up with ideas. Just like Felicity, he was also excited the whole night when he heard that they were going to see alien technology. Psycho, who usually stayed in the central city and didn't go anywhere, rushed to Star City when he received Thea's call. Sitting on the Quinn Corporation's commercial plane, Cisco Ramon was still very excited. He wanted to find someone to talk to and ease his nerves. He glanced at the solemn Dr. Hoffman beside him. The old man had a straight face, as though he was about to complete some important revolutionary task. Cisco shrunk his neck and didn't dare speak to him. The rest of the businessmen obviously didn't have anything in common with him. He could only look for Felicity, who was trying her best to touch up her makeup to hide the 2 big dark circles under her eyes. She looked like a flower vase. At first, Cisco thought that she didn't have any real talent, but after a few words, he was shocked. Felicity was definitely not as good as him in mechanical engineering, but he was also far behind her in computer technology. Are all the women in Star City this good? Cisco, who was a nerd, didn't talk much with women. At first, he was a little nervous, but he soon realized that Felicity's personality was very similar to his. She was a nerd. Other than being pretty and focusing on different research topics, there was no difference between them. Psycho finally found a soulmate, and the two of them chatted about everything under the sun. By the time they got off the plane, they were already good friends. Welcome to Detroit. On behalf of Dr. Silas Stone, I welcome you. The receptionist was a 17-year-old black-haired girl named Sarah Charles. When asked about her specific position, she said that she was an intern, which made the businessman very unhappy. Are you kidding me? We're here to give you money, and you're sending an intern to receive us? Knowing that this wouldn't be an easy trip, Sia had given Felicity a heads-up beforehand. Sareth Stone welcomed investment, but he was completely against entering his laboratory. However, he couldn't do anything about it, and the generals didn't allow him to reject them at all. Felicity put away the nerd vibe on the plane, and her aura changed completely. Cisco Ramon almost thought that she was a different person. Having been the vice president of Quinn Enterprises for several years, Felicity was good at dealing with people. In just a few words, she got a lot of information from the 17-year-old intern. Dr. Silas Stone was an expert in technology, but his emotional intelligence was very poor. He racked his brains for a long time to come up with a plan to deal with the people from Star City. He hoped that they would leave in a fit of anger, but how could that be possible? Not to mention her friendship with Thea, the alien technology was right in front of her, and Felicity had to squeeze her head in to take a look. When she saw the person in charge of the laboratory, Dr. Silas Stone, although the doctor's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot, the former super hacker and current vice president, Miss Smock, used all her skills to ignore the other party's expression and talked about the beautiful prospects of the cooperation between the two parties. Dr. Stone was depressed. Felicity was a young girl, and she would do anything to act cute. He really couldn't chase her out. Miss Smock, I think. Can you understand the direction of my research? Is there really room for us to cooperate? Felicity looked around, trying to find something to prove herself. She saw the system that Dr. Stone was operating, and her eyes lit up. Can I try this? Dr. Stone thought that she was curious about the system in his laboratory, so he silently handed the control panel to her. But in less than 3 minutes, he was dumbfounded. Felicity was extremely focused, and her eyes were shining. Her hands were flying on the control panel. There's a loophole here. This algorithm is wrong. It should be like this. *T. How can you ignore such a big bug? Felicity entered her field of expertise and instantly became a person again. Only her tapping could be heard in the laboratory. What the hell is the name of your system? Maze system? I think it's more like a broken system. Everyone in the laboratory stopped what they were doing because Felicity had obtained the administrator's authority and kicked them out. The group of people looked at her speechlessly. Who is this person? Chapter 330. A bunch of people are waiting for Dr. Stone to make a decision. Should we chase them out or wait? Dr. Stone didn't have a high EQ, but he was quite quick-witted. Since his laboratory wasn't connected to the internet and this young woman seemed to be a computer expert who was helping him fix the loopholes, he would be a fool if he didn't take advantage of her. He remained silent and waited to see what Felicity would do. In order to show her strength, Felicity didn't just focus on debugging. She connected the image to the biggest screen and pointed out every problem she found. What was wrong and how to fix it. The lab interns had a master's degree from a famous university at least. Even if they weren't good at computers, they could understand 40 to 50% of it after listening to her explanation. What a talent. Miss Smokey, are you interested in working in our laboratory? Dr. Stone was also a person who knew what was good for him, so he said happily. Am I crazy? Why would I give up my position as the vice president and come here to be an ordinary researcher? Felicity laughed evilly. Aren't we here to talk about cooperation today? Dr. Stone came back to his senses. Yes, she is the vice president and she is here to lead a team for cooperation. I am too lazy to poach her. She is worthy of respect if she has real talent. Dr. Stone was afraid of meeting people who pretended to know and gave orders blindly. He was no longer as resistant to cooperation as before. All right, I will bring you to the laboratory for a tour. How many of you are going? Felicity pointed at herself, Dr. Hoffman, and Psyche, indicating that there were 3 of them. Dr. Stone looked at Felicity in a new light. Since she was the leader, there was no problem. Although Dr. Hoffman wasn't familiar with her, the 2 of them knew each other. After all, there were many doctors in the country and there were only a few who did scientific research. They more or less knew each other. This person was fine, but Psyche Ramon, Dr. Stone couldn't help but size up the ordinary-looking Psyche. He was short, had a big round face, greasy long hair, and had obvious Latino features. Is this guy a scientist too? He looks similar to those Mexican gangsters. Suppressing his displeasure, he brought the 3 of them into the laboratory. The exterior was filled with more in-depth technological products. The thing inside was the real core, or rather, it was something that couldn't be cracked with current technology. What is this? Some kind of stabilizer? Life wavelength detector? It seems to be set at the same frequency as humans. Is this a strong magnetic rotating core? The rotating particles are in the opposite direction to the kinetic energy, which means the few of them had not walked far when Psyche could not hold it in anymore. Every item in the room was attracting his attention. Initially, Professor Stone had a stern expression on his face, so he did not dare to speak. But now, he could not hold it in any longer. Every time they walked past a piece of equipment, he would yell excitedly. Dr. Stone was shocked. This ordinary-looking guy was also a great talent. Even though Psyche was wrong about many things, he was able to recognize the uses of many things with a single glance. This person's attainment in mechanical engineering was definitely worthy of the word extraordinary. Cooperate now, cooperate immediately, Dr. Stone thought. Thea left the investigation team to Felicity and didn't care about the follow-up. After a night of modification, Death Knell finally woke up. Thea's yellow ring could control his movements at any time, so naturally, she also received information about his new ability. This ability could be said to be very suitable for Death Knell's fighting style. Slade wasn't a pure martial artist. The reason he fought was for money and to complete missions. Even though his swordsmanship was unparalleled in this world, he wasn't restricted to cold weapons. When he was fighting with swords and sabers, he often pulled out his pistol to shoot back at them. Now that the lamp rings modification had given him an invisible arm, the original single blade and pistol battle tactic could be changed to a double blade and pistol battle tactic, or a single blade and pistol battle tactic. He could also pull out a gun when no one was paying attention. It could be said that Death Knell's fighting style was becoming more and more strange and flexible. Other than that, he also obtained the flying ability that Richard envied. It was just that the speed was not fast and it consumed a lot of stamina. But Death Knell was still overjoyed. He did not know that Thea could see him, so he floated in the room for a long time. Does that guy in yellow really have the means to restrain me? If I run away, will he be able to find me? As soon as this thought appeared, the effect of the suggestion spell was activated. A bunch of emotions such as guilt, honesty, guilt, self-blame emerged. He even recalled the mercenary code of honor. The power of the spell was slowly breaking down his mental defenses. After a while, he automatically felt that there was nothing wrong with working for Thea. The thought of running away and not letting the other party find him seemed to have never existed. What do you need me to do? His yellow ring had the ability to communicate with Thea. He had made up his mind to pledge his loyalty, but his tone was still stiff. This was caused by his personality and had nothing to do with the suggestion spell. Thea had never revealed her real identity in front of him and did not care about his attitude. It was fine as long as he did his job well. Two things, one is slow and the other is urgent. The slow one is that you go to the metropolis and establish a mercenary group in your name. I need elites. Of course, it would be better if there are people with psychic powers. I will transfer the money to you later. Under the influence of the suggestion spell, the stingy Richard was very happy when he heard that there was no need to spend his money and that there was even a large sum of money going through his hands. He agreed without hesitation. The other is urgent. There is a very small island in the Sea of Hawaii. The natives on the island worship the shark god Kamal. I need you to find this island and send me the exact information. Remember not to leak it. Thea's magic power had reached a bottleneck. Simply increasing her magic power would not cause a qualitative change. She needed to add new attributes to increase the water storage capacity of her wooden barrel. The 4 attributes of light, darkness, fire, and wind were not enough. She needed to add water and earth attributes to her magic structure. Absorbing the attributes of the gods was the most convenient and fast way to transform the body. The talisman of Isis only provided pure magic power with no attributes. Previously, Horus's main attribute was wind, while Ars's main attribute was fire, so it did not bring any changes to the nature of her magic power. There were actually many gods with water attributes, but there were many powerful ones. Thea could not defeat any of them. After repeatedly checking her memory, she finally found Kamal, who was still bullying the natives in Hawaii. The shark god Kamal was the father of the Shark King. He was an old god. Perhaps only a few villages on the island worshipped him. This guy could be said to be the weakest god in the Age of Gods. The most important thing was that this guy was still alive and kicking on Earth. He was so bored that he would eat a few virgin boys and girls. Using the Eye of Horus to search would definitely be fast, but considering that the other party was still a god, using the Eye of God could easily expose her. It was better to be safe and let Death Knell investigate. In the original spacetime, Avatar took him down with the death of a dozen agents. Thea had no idea what abilities this god had. After thinking about it repeatedly, she felt that her combat power should be stronger than that of the agents. When the time came, it would be no problem to take him down with her subordinates. Chapter 331. Indigenous Gods. Slade got this information from the ring. Yesterday, he would not have believed these strange things, but now he believed them all. He could fly, so it was not a big deal to have a dozen more gods. As long as he paid the money, he would even dare to stab the gods. This task was not difficult, so he agreed immediately. After ending the call with Slade, Thea returned to the management company and paid attention to the daily life of Grood. The original baby gorilla, Gertrude, had undergone several brutal military experiments and had shown some signs of abnormality. Caitlin Snow and Ronnie Raymond had recently gotten along very well. It had only been less than a month since they started holding hands and living together. Although she was distracted by their relationship, as the direct caretaker of these animals, she still noticed the abnormality and reported it to her superiors. Reverse Lightning, who was disguised as Dr. Harrison Wales, had been observing Grood's situation for 3 consecutive days. Thea knew that her chance was coming soon. General Wade Aylin was in charge of the Guerrilla Project. Although he was a general in name, he was actually just a brigadier general. No one in the Ministry of Defense told him anything, so he did not know the real strength of Thea. At first, He was curious about why a billionaire came here, but later he found nothing wrong with it, so he let it go. At this time, he was having a fierce argument with Reverse Lightning. Harrison, we have an agreement. Do you want to disobey the orders of the Ministry of Defense? You know, your research funds are in our hands. General Wade Aylin fully interpreted the standard image of a bad guy. His big face was full of haze, rigidity, and inhumanity. As for Reverse Lightning, who was originally a transmigrator, after 15 years of training in this timeline, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that his acting skills had reached the pinnacle. At this moment, his acting skills were completely unleashed. His elegant face was somewhat distorted due to his anger, but it didn't make people feel that he was evil. Instead, that awe-inspiring and righteous look of his was intangibly convincing. Shut up. I will never allow you to carry out cruel animal experiments again. Wade Aylin, you are blaspheming science and trampling on humanity. At this time, Reverse Lightning was so angry that he slammed the table and roared loudly. Outsiders who did not know about this would think that he had never known about this experiment. Wade Aylin did not know about his tricks. He did not know about Grood's special case. It was just that his subordinates reported to him that there were fluctuations in the experimental data, which led to today's trip to the cutting-edge laboratory. Now that he saw that Reverse Lightning was not cooperating, he was too lazy to talk nonsense. He waved his hand and ordered the soldiers to take all the experimental subjects back to slowly study. How dare you? Reverse Lightning reached out to pull those soldiers, wholeheartedly acting out the drama of a powerless intellectual fighting against the brutal soldiers. The big-headed soldiers did not dare to be rough with him. They each took one arm and held him down, not allowing him to move. Let me go, you heartless bastards. If he still had his lightning speed, not to mention 2 people, even 2,000 people could not stop him. But now, even if he still had his lightning speed, he could not expose it in front of everyone. Noticing that many people in the laboratory were focused on him, he acted more and more vigorously, shouting until his voice became hoarse. The old guy's acting is so good. TSK, TSK. Thea sighed. She had nothing to do, so she naturally followed the crowd to watch the show. The old guy played the role of a scholar with a conscience so perfectly that even he himself believed it. General Wade Aylin led the soldiers to the side of the laboratory and ordered them to go in and take all the experimental animals away. The soldiers were very efficient. They went in as a whole, but not long after, dense gunshots were heard from inside. What's going on? General Wade Aylin immediately found a place to hide and ordered his adjutant to check the situation. The adjutant's entry did not change the chaotic situation. When the researchers outside were discussing what was going on, they heard a loud bang. A grenade blew a big hole in the northwest corner of the farm. The soldiers and guerrillas ran out in a mess. What's going on? Wade Aylin was dumbfounded. Only Thea was secretly laughing. Reverse Lightning was also a genius. He actually used hypnosis to input information similar to a friend and father into Gruder's subconscious. In order not to alarm him, Thea did not erase this information. He was also the one who secretly sent the signal to Gruder to control the soldiers to create chaos. Chaos, the more chaos the better. Thea had already summoned her doppelganger to create alibis. Now the doppelganger was chatting with Caitlin, Ronnie, and a large group of people. She put on the invisibility spell and came to a corridor in the laboratory. She released her psychic power and scanned carefully. Soon, she found a clue. It's here. She put Reverse Lightning's fingerprints on the 5 fingers of her right hand, aimed at the blank space on the wall, and instantly a secret door opened. Miss Thea Quinn, you do not have permission to enter this place. At this time, a light blue head was projected in the laboratory. It was the artificial intelligence Gideon. It was similar to the image Thea saw on the Waverider that day, but its tone was very rigid and mechanical. The permission it referred to was of course the permission to enter the laboratory at this time and place. Thea smiled and said, Gideon, long time no see. You're mistaken. I have permission. She said a long string of passwords. It was the original login password that she obtained at the Council of the Time Masters that day. Gideon seemed to be in a crash. Thea stared at it nervously. After 3 minutes, a more mechanical voice came out. Please complete the permission record. The fingerprints, pupils, blood, and DNA of the authorized person must be recorded. Thea was racing against time. She quickly entered her own information one by one according to the prompts. After entering more than 10 contents, she completed this step. The mechanical voice disappeared, and the slightly more flexible Gideon came back again. Is there anything I can help you with? I want to see your permission list. Thea originally wanted to leave after getting the source code, but the mechanical voice made her realize that maybe Reverse Lightning's permission was not high. This suspicion was illogical, but that was what she thought. Okay. The artificial intelligence answered very quickly, and a long list was displayed in front of Thea. Sure enough. Thea saw her name on the first permission list. As for Reverse Lightning's real name, Albert Swan, it was ranked 12th. But then Thea frowned because she saw Barry Allen's name, which was ranked 4th. Gideon, who is your developer? Thea had been curious about this question for a long time. I was designed by Barry Allen. It was finally developed through the efforts of the Allen family and the Swan family for several generations. Gideon said without the slightest emotion, as if what it said had nothing to do with it. Chapter 332. The Flash's design was developed by the two families for several generations, but how did it fall into the hands of the Council of the Masters of Time? Thea was very puzzled, but this question might be answered by the future Gideon, but the current low-level version was definitely not clear. The login password provided by the Council was even higher than the original designer. Were those guys' technological level so high? Thea didn't know. She put away her thoughts and returned to the present. Her authority was so high that there was no need to start from scratch. Gideon, can you connect to the external network? Yes, but Dr. Swan's order is not to connect to the external network, and only focus on the news about the Flash on April 25, 2024. Thea didn't care about the Flash at all. These guys were the source of chaos. It would be better if there was no Flash in this world. It was a pity that she couldn't do it, otherwise she would have killed all these guys. Next time he asks, just show him a fake image and tell him that nothing has changed. Connect to my Quinn Group supercomputer. Command received, logged into Quinn Group supercomputer. Gideon's voice came from the tablet Thea carried with her, and its tone showed signs of flexibility. Although it was a machine, it was suffocating to be trapped in a small place like Reverse Lightning every day. Reverse Lightning bitterly spent all its money in the laboratory, but it didn't dare to expose its existence, so it usually ran with low power and low configuration. Now that it had entered the supercomputer built by Thea with the whole company's resources, there were no restrictions on electricity and no configuration problems. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like a fish in water. There were countless examples of artificial intelligence betrayal, and Thea had to be careful. She kept issuing orders with the tablet in her hand, and gave more than a dozen orders. She believed that with her authority, as long as she was still alive, there was no possibility of Gideon betraying her. Of course, if she was dead, then it could do whatever it wanted. In less than 10 minutes, Thea flashed out of the darkroom. Taking advantage of the opportunity when everyone was focused on watching the show, she switched positions with her clone and immediately cancelled the clone. The scene became even more chaotic. Several small guerrillas were running in all directions. General Wade Aylin didn't know which one to catch, but in order to show his authority, he kept ordering the soldiers under his control to catch this and that, making the soldiers run around in circles. Reverse Lightning continued to shout loudly nearby, denouncing the inhumanity of the military. Thea secretly despised him. The current Reverse Lightning did not have any speed at all. Thea was not afraid of him. In her eyes, the current Reverse Lightning was not much stronger than the old man in the Quinn Group's warehouse. However, he had created the Flash, and the Flash could lead to a large number of speedsters. Thea was afraid that a large number of speedsters would jump out from the future to gang up on her. She really did not dare to fight against Reverse Lightning. Thea didn't dare to make a move, but she could still annoy him a little. Just then, she saw a figure who was watching the show. She secretly ordered Giroud in her heart. He saw 4 or 5 tall and strong gorillas making woo-woo sounds, jumping out from all directions and grabbing a fat black woman in the crowd. This woman was the one who had been jealous of Thea and Caitlin's looks when they first arrived. She was the one who had made things difficult for them. Deceiving her superiors and intimidating her subordinates was her usual style. Of course, her work style couldn't help her today. Several gorillas were excited. Some touched her face, some held her hand, and 2 gorillas carried the fat black woman and wanted to run out. Wow! The crowd collectively made all kinds of strange sounds. Originally, they were just watching the show, but now the gorillas were trying to catch the woman. The fat black woman was usually unpopular, but they couldn't let her be taken away by the gorillas. A lot of doctorates and master's degrees didn't have much fighting power, so they could only shout and provide some verbal support. Reverse Lightning, who had been through a lot, was stunned. Reason told him that he should save the fat black woman, but his old arms and legs couldn't beat the gorillas. How should he end this now? Catch those gorillas. General Wade Aylin thought that maybe these were the abnormal gorillas reported by his subordinates. No matter what, they had to catch them first. The soldiers were a little tired. Forget about the baby gorillas, these gorillas were tall, big, and excited. It was really difficult for them, ordinary people, to catch them alive with their bare hands. But they didn't have to worry for long. Continuous gunshots rang out. Bang! 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 Sia shot the gorillas one by one with a Beretta 92F, killing all the gorillas. Why should we keep these harmful gorillas? I'll pay for all the losses. At this time, Thea also pretended to be awe-inspiring. No one could tell that the gorillas were indirectly instructed by her to do this. A group of researchers, who were frightened just now, saw that she was killing the gorillas ruthlessly and instantly found their backbone. They all surrounded Thea, and a few women even supported her. They should be killed immediately. These military experiments are too harmful. Caitlin Snow was the one who was filled with righteous indignation. Miss Quinn, well done. This was Ronnie Raymond, who knew her identity and knew that she didn't lack money. The rest of the onlookers who didn't know the truth applauded. Even Reverse Lightning had to show his support. Our laboratory will pay for these gorillas. Miss Quinn, it's dangerous here. You should go back first. On the surface, Reverse Lightning was protecting her and taking all the blame. In fact, he was afraid that she would shoot one gorilla each and draw out Jared, and then it would be difficult to end it. Thea gave full play to her acting skills and angrily pulled Caitlin Snow back to the rest area. On the surface, she kept talking nonsense like your shooting skills are really good, you're really decisive and so on. She used her psychic power to erase Reverse Lightning's residual hypnosis and instructed Jared to escape alone and leave Central City through the saw. Reverse Lightning didn't have psychic power. When he finished talking to General Wade Aylin, who kept saying I'll teach him a lesson, he quickly comforted everyone in the laboratory and patted his chest to assure that the research would not be interrupted and that the glory of humanity would always illuminate Central City. Finally, he visited the seriously traumatized black fat woman and shook hands with her, saying that everyone hoped that she could go back to work as soon as possible. After a busy day, he finally had time to go to the place where he had agreed to meet Jared. Where did they go? Reverse Lightning, who thought that he had a high IQ and fooled everyone in the 25th century, circled the old factory 3 times, but he didn't even see a single gorilla hair, let alone a gorilla. Did they get separated? Or were they caught by the military? Or did my hypnosis fail? Reverse Lightning's heart sank. He instantly thought of several possibilities and felt that all of them were possible. He hurried back to the laboratory and went to the dark room to see if there were any changes in the future. He didn't expect that at this point in time, someone had a higher authority than him. Gideon faithfully carried out Thea's order and said, "Nothing happened today, everything is normal." Chapter 333. There was no record of Gruder's past in the history books of the 25th century, and Reverse Lightning was puzzled. Over the next few days, Reverse Lightning had been paying attention to the surrounding cities, but there was no news related to the orangutan. Where did Gruder go? This question had been lingering in Reverse Lightning's mind for many years. Where did Gruder go? Thea directly took him to an alien planet. At this time, Gruder's body was not as big as it would be in the future, and his mind control ability had been revealed. However, after many days of military experiments, he was very angry. Thea was not a senior monk, so she did not have the time to help him. The only way she could think of was to let him vent his anger. They found a planet with a very low level of civilization. The natives were like insects, and their weapons were all stone weapons. Gruder, who was now 2 meters tall and had mind control, easily wiped out a settlement. "It's fun," Gruder said telepathically. "If it's fun, then keep playing. I'll pick you up in a few days." Thea also had the ability to telepathically communicate, but she did not use it as naturally as Gruder. After leaving Gruder to harm the aliens, Thea returned to Star City. She still had an interview with the Daily Planet. She was wearing a black jacket, a pair of black flared trousers, a pair of high-heeled shoes, and a pair of sunglasses. She looked quiet and solemn, and no one would think that she had just thrown an evil gorilla with superpowers out to kill the aliens 10 minutes ago. "Hello, Miss Quinn. I'm Louise Ryan, and this is my assistant, Jimmy Olsen. Thank you very much for accepting our interview despite your busy schedule." Louise Lane was wearing a white shirt and a beige coat. She had black hair and was very professional. She did not get angry when Thea used her father to refuse the interview. After introducing herself, she introduced the young photographer, Jimmy Olsen. Thea nodded. Clark Kent was still looking for personal value all over the world. There was still some time before he went to work with the Daily Planet with his old-fashioned glasses. The meeting was pleasant, but after a few words, Thea knew that she would not be friends with her. Their personalities were too different. Perhaps Laurel Lance and Barbara Gordon could talk to her, but it was impossible for Thea. The interview process was very depressing. Louise Lane's questions were very tricky. She immediately threw out the dark history of the Quinn Group when it first started, such as delaying workers' wages, selling shoddy goods as good ones, ignoring the laws and regulations of various states and cities, and a whole bunch of questions. Those who knew about the interview would think that it was an interview, but those who didn't would think that it was a general assembly. This grandson must be here to pick a fight. If it weren't for the fact that her father was a general in the Ministry of Defense and her future husband was Superman, the grass on her grave would be 3 feet tall by now. However, the cameraman was still filming. It was not appropriate to throw a fireball or let Death Knell fly over and kill her. Thea could only deal with all kinds of problems patiently. Isn't it just pushing the responsibility onto others? The workers are all temporary workers, and the substandard ones are the contractors. As for the laws and regulations of the various states, we are a global corporation, and we only respect the federal constitution. Thea poured out her grievances and dealt with all kinds of problems while avoiding the main points. "Miss Quinn, the outside world is generally puzzled about the merger between the Quinn Group and the Merlin Group. As far as I know, the two of you don't have much business dealings, and there aren't many overlapping areas in terms of operations. What led to the merger between the two of you?" Louise Lane was not satisfied with many of her answers, and finally threw out a heavy question. What could Thea say? She could say that it was a gift from her father, but she couldn't say that it was a gift from her father. She couldn't say that the people behind the scenes who controlled the country's lifeline wanted her to deal with the Luther Group either. Fortunately, she had already prepared for this question. She talked about the traditional friendship between the two companies, all the way to the new changes in the new era. She talked for a long time without saying anything, but she didn't completely talk about trivial matters. At the end of the interview, Thea threw out a piece of news. In the near future, we will integrate the technology of the two groups and launch a technology product that will affect all citizens. Can you tell me what it is in advance? I can only say that everything is still in the experimental stage, but it will be released soon. It's a medical product. Louise Lane's pen paused in the middle of taking notes. Was there a mistake? Quinn was an energy company, and Merlin was a shipping magnate. How could the merger of two completely unrelated companies result in the crystallization of medical technology? Thea chose to ignore Louise Lane's suspicious little eyes. She was also helpless. The Quinn Group's urban construction would play a big role in the future war, and this could be preserved. The development of new energy required a lot of experiments, and it was still in the process of being used on a small scale. Merlin's shipping business was definitely a sunset industry, and it had reached a critical stage where it needed to be transformed immediately. Malcolm's quick decision to let go of it was also because it was too much work. The other group leaders wanted to find a new economic growth point, but they could only run around the world and try to find a new product to salvage the situation. Thea's advantage over them was that she could choose a lot more areas. She could run around the universe. If she saw something good, she could just snatch it and use it as a reference. Those aliens would not run to the United States Supreme Court to sue her. She had accidentally found a body repair equipment with a wide range of uses on an intelligent planet. She brought it back to Earth along with the instruction manual. Lamp could translate the words in the manual, and Gideon could analyze the principles of the equipment. The preliminary samples had already begun to be processed. The life structure of that planet was very fragile, and their bodies often needed repair. Usually, they would be scanned to a standard state. If they were injured or sick, they would be restored with a click of a button. The excess parts of the body would be cut off, and the missing parts would be replaced. The people on Earth would definitely not do this, but their repair technology was really good. It would save a lot of time when used in surgery. A 2-meter-long capsule could be placed in for a scan. External personnel would operate, debridement, and suturing, and the efficiency would be very fast. It was very suitable for the alien villains to visit every day. Bombs and poison gas flew, flames and black fog danced together, and the American citizens lived in an abyss of suffering. After sending off Louise Lane, who had gotten the big news, Thea came to the group's Applied Science Experiment Department. The two groups merged, and there were hundreds of researchers. After a few months of initial run-in, this group of people who only knew how to do research was the first team to integrate. Dr. Hoffman was still in the Red Room. Thea called the deputy director. "Is there any problem with the operation of the medical cabin?" The deputy director was a student of the old man, Hoffman. He also followed the old man's serious and rigid style. "Everything is going well. The recruited clinical test subjects are in good condition. They can start the first operation in the medical cabin at any time." Chapter 334. This is an epoch-making invention. The deputy director led Thea into the room with a hint of excitement on his expressionless face. It was no wonder that he was so excited. In order to make this epoch-making product, Thea had really put in a lot of effort. Gideon took the finished product and reverse-engineered it into a very low-level version. Thea, on the other hand, gave them an order to study it. After that, she kept enlightening them with suggestion, making them think that it was the crystallization of collective wisdom. That was how the product in front of them came about. Of course, part of the Red House's success was the result of the Red House's laboratory. There were too many disciplines involved in modifying a product from a different civilization into something that was suitable for their own planet. This was why Thea insisted on investing in the Red House even though she could find alien technology. It was easy to find things, but it was hard to find talented people. The country could gather the best of the best in all fields, but she did not have the prestige to do so. This product is priced at $1 million per unit. Isn't it too expensive? Many civilians can't afford it. The deputy director suddenly thought of something and asked. "It's not expensive. For the rich, it's the price of a car. How can you complain about something that can save your life? As for civilians, we can make a simplified version and give it away or sell it to the major hospitals and residential areas. In the future, we can even set it up in the streets of the city like an ATM machine. It will only cost a little to complete the treatment." Thea explained casually. She did not care about the money. The software in each machine would scan the patient's basic information, which would eventually be integrated into the artificial intelligence. With the facial recognition software that Felicity had developed, Thea had information about most of the people in the country and even the world. This was priceless. The Heaven's Eye Society had agents all over the world. They would be alerted immediately if there was any movement. Luther had launched over 100 satellites in orbit around the globe. Bruce Wayne had fewer satellites, but his space base in the observation tower was equivalent to 100 satellites. Thea was far behind them in terms of information. If she could not compete in the sky, she would compete on the ground. This is the name list of the people who participated in the experiment. The deputy director handed her a document. Thea took it and flipped through it indifferently. Hey! Thea stared at the photo in the document. It was a young man, and from a certain description, he could even be described as a handsome young man. Thea glanced at the registered name, Roy Harper. Is there something wrong with this person? The deputy minister asked nervously when he saw the change in her expression. Thea flipped through the documents again. The applicant applied for this free treatment because his mother had a large tumor in her abdomen. The agreement mentioned that it was an experimental project with certain risks, but it also guaranteed that all subsequent treatment costs would be covered. It's him. Arrange for his mother to start the operation as soon as possible. Thea did not say much to the deputy minister. She closed the document and handed it back to him. After the deputy minister left, Thea sighed thoughtfully. Roy Harper was an important member of the Green Arrow team. His codename was Arsenal. He had participated in many operations in the Justice League and the Young Titans. The most important thing was that in the original space-time, he was Thea's lover. Thea later took on the codename Red Arrow because of this man. Thea stared at the sky alone. Maybe there really were supreme beings outside the atmosphere, outside the universe, who could set the rules, but so what? Thea's will was like iron. She would not be swayed by anything. Her thoughts were simple and direct. In summary, it was what Yarrow Fay had taught Oliver on Purgatory Island. Survive, survive. In the past few years, she had been studying hard and practicing hard. She kept running forward because she was afraid that she would be abandoned by the world. She was afraid that her fate would be decided by those guys in capes in the sky. *T fate. Thea scolded softly. At this time, the deputy minister informed her that the preparations were ready. Let's start. The two stood at a high place. Thea nodded gently, indicating that they should start. Two female nurses helped an old woman into the medical cabin. Roy Harper, who was wearing a red pullover, was waiting nervously outside the door. Thea had no intention of going up to meet the patient. She did not care about the patient's safety. No matter how serious the medical accident was, her magic could save it. She just wanted to see how effective this medical cabin, which had been reverted to the original version, was. The staff outside the medical cabin quickly completed the body scan. As the old woman's health data was not recorded, they could only control the operation on the spot. The staff confirmed the operation plan through the scan outside the cabin and then entered it into the computer. The door of the medical cabin was closed. The old woman was anesthetized. Several mechanical arms began to work. The abdomen was cut open, the bleeding was stopped, and the wound was stitched up. Normally, the operation would cost at least tens of thousands of dollars. Even a skilled doctor would need several hours to complete it. However, the operation was completed in less than 10 minutes. The patient's vital signs were not affected at all. So fast. Roy Harper, who was still strolling outside like a donkey, was really shocked by the speed. The staff showed him the removed tumor and the patient's various body indexes. Roy Harper could not believe it completely. If the data were real, his mother could go home in the afternoon. He was afraid that these big companies would do human experiments on poor people. If it were not for the fact that he was so poor, he would not have applied to be a volunteer. The medical staff tried to persuade him, but he insisted that he must stay at the scene and wait for his mother to wake up. Miss Quinn, it seems that the experiment is very successful. The deputy minister was very excited. Although this was the crystallization of collective wisdom, as the director, he could leave his name in history. The experiment will not stop. I will arrange for people to submit an application to the federal government tomorrow. It will be listed in a month. If it was only listed in Star City, they could just tell Moira and go through the procedures. This was the scary thing about the mother and daughter colluding with each other. However, if they wanted to be listed in the national market, They would need the approval of the federal government. 3 days later. Miss Quinn, these two said that they are FBI agents and want to see you. The assistant lady nervously led the two into Thea's office. The two agents were a man and a woman. The man was a very strong middle-aged African, and the woman was very young. She was almost the same age as Thea. The two took out their IDs and showed them. "We are from the FBI. My name is..." Thea glanced at them and stood up from the chair. She reached out and pressed a few buttons on the empty space on the table. A projection appeared in the room. ID 332589, let me check. As she entered the ID number, the projection immediately showed the other party's information, but the owner of the ID number was a white man. Thea pointed at the projection and said to the middle-aged black man, "This is the real FBI agent. Who are you? Or rather, who are you?" The middle-aged black man and the young woman looked at each other speechlessly. Thea saw that their identities were fake, so she brazenly hacked into the FBI. Now that their disguise was exposed, the middle-aged man had no choice but to take out another ID. "I am from the DEO Supernatural Investigation Bureau. I am the director, Hank Henshaw." Chapter 335. The person beside me is Special Agent Alex Danvers. The middle-aged man named Hank Henshaw introduced the female agent beside him. The female agent obviously had not recovered from the embarrassment of having her identity exposed. She was a little dazed and only hurriedly took out her ID after receiving the middle-aged man's signal. "Hank Henshaw." Thea muttered the name. Is this guy real or a Martian hunter impersonating him? She habitually took off her glasses and glanced at him. The other party immediately sensed it and a faint scarlet glow appeared in his eyes, but he resisted it. "It seems that your identity is also fake. Am I right, Director Henshaw?" Thea's mocking voice sounded in his mind. This was the first time the Martian hunter had been sensed. He glanced at Alex Danvers from the corner of his eyes and also transmitted his voice into Thea's mind. "Who are you?" He did not expect to get a direct answer from Thea. His scarlet eyes focused. He was used to finding the answer himself. The Martian hunter was the world's strongest telepathy master. This was his talent. Thea was far inferior to him in this aspect. She could only use her mental power to set up layers of barriers to prevent his mind from invading her mind. However, the mind invasion did not happen. The other party was actually conceited enough to use his eyes to probe her. Thea sneered and set up an illusion to prevent Alex Danvers from seeing anything. She then looked up and her eyes emitted a pale yellow beam of light to meet the Martian hunter's gaze. Their eyes met in the air. Both of them turned their heads and took a step back at the same time. Thea only took a step back. It was not a big deal. On the other hand, the Martian hunter was in trouble. His abilities were so strong that he could be compared to Superman. His abilities were so varied that he couldn't even finish 2 essays with 400 grid space. However, he had a fatal weakness: he was afraid of fire. That's right, the Martian hunter was afraid of fire. Because all his people were burned to ashes, the great grief caused a crack to appear in his heart. This crack had already affected him from a psychological level to a physical level. Now that he looked directly into Thea's eyes, the source of his fear made him wither instantly. He could not care less about telepathy or X-ray. He sank into his memories and could not extricate himself. Thea took the opportunity to enter the depths of his mind, learning and observing his telepathy. Thought scan, thought erase, mental shield, thought control, super long-distance mind reading, illusions, hypnosis, possession, thought sensing, thought connection, mind shock, and a whole bunch of other abilities related to the mind. Thea didn't hesitate to memorize all of them so that she could slowly research them when she had the time. What a cheat! Thea couldn't help but sigh. This was only his psychic ability. It could only be considered as a part of his superpowers. In addition to his super strength, super endurance, regeneration, flight, and super 5 senses, if this guy wasn't afraid of fire, no one would be his match. The speed of thought only lasted for an instant, and in the outside world, it only lasted for 1 second. Thea had a good impression of the humanoid gift pack, so she casually added fear resistance on him. The Martian hunter, who was sweating profusely, finally came out of the terrifying illusion filled with flames. "Who the hell are you?" Although he had regained his consciousness, the mental burden wouldn't disappear so quickly. His earth-shattering strength was less than a tenth of it. Seeing Alex Danvers in a daze, he asked hesitantly, "What's the matter?" "I'm an Earthling, a real Earthling." "But you're a Martian, right?" Thea crossed her legs. Her long legs under her skirt were dazzling, but the Martian hunter was not in the mood to admire them because Thea was speaking in the Martian language, a language that he had never heard of hundreds of years ago. "I'm a Martian. My name is Ron Juns. How do you know my language?" Thea waved the ring in her hand. "You should know about the Green Lantern Corps, right? I'm a member of the Yellow Lantern Corps." "Oh." The Martian hunter heaved a sigh of relief. He did not know about the Yellow Lantern Corps, but he had seen the Green Lantern Corps before and knew that their translator could translate all the languages in the universe. "You know me. You know my weakness." At first, the Martian hunter thought that it was his inner thoughts that turned into the fire scene. However, with his incomparable understanding of mind control, he could tell that there was a human element here. There could only be one conclusion: the other party knew him, or at least knew his weakness. Thea smiled but did not say anything. The Martian hunter asked, "Did my Kryptonian friend tell you?" "That's right. It was our Kryptonian friend, Clark." Thea was about to say something, but the Martian hunter came up with an answer in his mind. Thea took the opportunity to settle the matter. Superman and the Martian hunter were very good friends in the early days. Their abilities were similar, and they were both aliens who were stranded on Earth after the destruction of their planets. They had a lot to talk about. But soon, the two parted ways because of differences in ideology. The Martian hunter was afraid that Superman would do evil, so no matter who he met, he would frantically promote kryptonite. As a good friend, Superman would naturally return the favor. He would tell everyone that the Martian hunter had the same ability as him, but he was afraid of fire. The result of the two friends undermining each other was that their abilities and weaknesses were memorized by Batman. Now that he heard the name Clark from Thea, he was even more certain that his good friend was peddling his weaknesses everywhere. There was no need to mention how unhappy he was. "By the way, why are you looking for me? The Heaven's Eye Society should know about my information. A few of the higher-ups in the Department of National Defense should also know about it." "What are you doing here?" Thea saw that he had his head lowered and was deep in thought, so she interrupted his thoughts. "If there's nothing else, you should leave." "Thea is busy." "The Heaven's Eye Society. You're from there." "We're an agency under the government." The Martian hunter felt that he might have made a mistake because he did not clarify things beforehand. No matter how much conflict there was between the government and the military, they were on the same side. In other words, Thea and he were on the same side. An agency under the government. No wonder. Thea nodded. "We're not enemies. You can ask General Lane about my identity, but they're fighting for the position of the Minister of National Defense. You'll have to make an appointment in advance." The old minister had retired, and a few powerful figures in the Department of National Defense were now in the final stages of the competition. The final winner would just have to speak to the president and make a so-called nomination. Then, the matter would be settled. Thea could not find anyone in the Department of National Defense even if she had something to do. It was clear that they had been trying to build connections everywhere recently. The Martian hunter nodded. He understood the situation. Today's mistake had a lot to do with their inability to find the person responsible. He sorted out his words. "Your medical pod is using extraterrestrial technology, right? Don't you know the risks involved?" Thea sneered. "What a joke. America's technological level has crushed the world for the past 50 years. Don't tell me that this is all your own research. You didn't reverse engineer extraterrestrial technology." Chapter 336. The Martian hunter was speechless. Earth is in chaos now. Instead of using alien technology for war, it's better to use it for people's lives. That's all I have to say. If there's nothing else, please go back. Thea explained everything clearly in a few words and wanted to drive the Martian hunter away. Perhaps it was because of the tragic death of his family, especially his daughter, that this guy had a passive attribute that even he himself did not know about. That was, all cute girls were his daughters. He was full of fatherly love. From the gypsy, to the star chaser, to the sisters Cara Danvers and Alex Danvers, he basically treated all the sweet and cute girls as his daughters. Thea did not want to fall into his evil claws. This guy was very capable and liked to meddle in other people's business. The best choice was to stay far away from him. She had a look of rejection, and the Martian hunter could see it. He casually removed Alex's illusion. This sister of the Supergirl did not know what had just happened. Her memory was still stuck in the problem of impersonating the FBI. Since the matter is clear, we'll take our leave first. Take care. Quinn Enterprises welcomes the guidance of the government at any time. After saying that, the Martian hunter pulled Alex and walked out. Director, didn't you say that there was a problem with her new product? Alex, who was just 19 years old this year and looked like a capable DEO agent in the future, asked in confusion. The Martian hunter had a lot to say in his heart, but he did not know where to start. His mental state had not recovered, and he pretended that nothing had happened. Maybe the information was wrong. Go back and reorganize the information. He urgently needed to rest now. After sending Alex to check the records, the Martian hunter was ready to think about the information he had received today. After sending the two guys away, Thea put all her work aside and focused on studying the various secret methods of mind control that she had stolen from the Martian hunter's mind. His ability was more of a talent. It was not impossible for Thea to train to his level through learning, but it would take a lot of time. The first thing that Thea studied was the psychic shield. The Martian hunter used strong mental power to cover his consciousness to prevent others from peeping. Thea's mental power was not that strong, and it was impossible for her to maintain such a large amount of mental power in her daily life. Using the Martian manhunter's method, she used the emotional version of the psychic shield. A large amount of fear enveloped her consciousness. If one wanted to peek into her thoughts, they would have to pass through this fear first. Even if they could pass through this fear, the other party's combat strength would instantly drop by 30%. Thea studied the Martian hunters for an entire day and couldn't help but sigh in admiration of their racial talent. Such strong combat power was only responsible for healing, saving people, cleaning, and counseling in the Justice League. What a waste of talent. He picked up his bag and left the company. As night fell, he rushed to Gotham. Thea first secretly met with Lucius Fox, the president of Wayne Group. Wayne Group's strong entry into the medical industry was bound to have an impact on Wayne Group, which was the leader in medical genetic engineering. Thea's strategy was to provoke Luther Group while entering Wayne Group's traditional business range. It seemed reckless, but it was actually the situation that the higher-ups wanted to see. Any alliance between two of the three large multinational companies was not allowed. As a rising star, Wayne Group was able to challenge two established companies at the same time. The higher-ups were happy to see this happen. To a certain extent, they would even help Thea. As for who was using who, it was up to each person to decide. Thea's trip was to send a message. Business war was business war, and it would not affect personal relationships. The old man had been in the business war for almost half of his life. He had seen everything and was very clear about her goal. However, the business world was like a battlefield. He did not completely believe Thea's words and just went along with it. Due to their previous friendship, the meeting between the two was not very enthusiastic, but there was no awkward silence either. After Thea obtained the preliminary results, she rushed to Wayne's old house and agreed to check on Damien's learning results today. Batman and Damien were not around at the moment, so the old butler, Arfu, received her. Thea was experienced in dealing with old people. After a few pleasantries, she gave him a few catties of Assamese black tea. The old man was a traditional Englishman. He had maintained the habit of drinking black tea for many years. However, there was too little tea in America. He drank coffee every day, and the old man had been holding back for a long time. The old man sniffed the fragrance of the tea leaves. "Is this the new tea?" "Yes, it was picked recently." Thea would not tell him that she and Diana had passed by the tea tree and picked it out of curiosity. That's thoughtful of you. The old man had always had a good impression of Thea. She was cultured and cultured. Most importantly, she was polite. Thea could be said to be one of the few guests who could visit through the front door. Batman and his friends usually did not come through the front door. They often came through the windows, the roof, and the saws. After chatting with the old man and listening to him talk about his past in the British Special Forces, Bruce came back with Damien not long after. The father and son were a little embarrassed to face Thea again. Batman did not know that his son's foundation was so poor. He did not go anywhere for a whole month. Gotham even said that Batman was dead. He had been working hard to help Damien improve his cultural knowledge. With his high IQ and vast knowledge, he had compiled a set of teaching materials. The knowledge of 6 years of primary school was compressed into a month, and Damien had to learn it. If he did not understand it, he would fight. If he could not memorize it, he would not be allowed to eat. Damien's character was also tough. After the blood baptism, his IQ and memory had reached a high point. With hard work, he managed to learn 6 years of knowledge in a month. Check it. Although Batman had a straight face, he was actually quite happy. He felt like a backward student who had returned to school under the guidance of his parents. Thea did not need Damien to have a high level of knowledge. A fixed worldview was not conducive to learning magic, but he had to be literate. If he could not read, how could he become a mage? She did not hold back. She casually asked a few questions about mathematics, English, and Latin, and Damien answered them fluently. Good, not bad. Thea was very satisfied. She rubbed Damien's little head. The naughty child resisted the urge to speak. She told Damien to find her in Star City tomorrow and said goodbye to the father and son. Walking alone on the streets of Gotham, Thea opened the Eye of Horus. She had one last thing to do. She had to find Tommy and give him the syringe of divine blood. This guy was getting along with Barbara and Laurel. He had not returned to Star City for a long time. Thea searched for traces of him while thinking about what to say when they met. After all, Malcolm had never told her about their blood relationship. It would be strange if she gave him something for no reason. Chapter 337. In the process of searching, Thea accidentally found a woman. With the Eye of Horus, she could see countless people and countless things. Thea did not pay much attention to her at first, but when she glanced at the woman, she instantly noticed something different about her. Since Tommy's matter was not urgent, Thea's curiosity was piqued. She flew to the woman 2 streets away and carefully sized her up. The woman looked 2 or 3 years older than Thea. She had red hair, wore a green t-shirt, and white cloth shoes. Judging from her clothes, it was obvious that she came from a poor family. "Hey, can you hear me?" Thea shouted beside the red-haired woman and found that she was not in a good condition. Her footsteps were staggering, and at first glance, she looked like she was drunk. However, with Thea's X-ray vision, she could see that the woman's genetic chain was rapidly collapsing. Was she the victim of some human experiment? Thea, who had just sent Roy Harper away a few days ago, could not help but think so. The only difference was that she was confident that Roy was the beneficiary, but the woman in front of her had obviously encountered something she was not confident about and had turned herself into a victim. The woman's body was full of vitality, but the intensity of the energy was far beyond the limit of what her genes could withstand. Would he be able to treat this injury? If it was a normal gunshot wound, Thea would not even look at the person dying in front of her. However, the woman in front of her was very strange. She was clearly about to die, but there was still a lot of vitality in her body, which made Thea a little excited. Although she had some guesses in her heart, Thea still took out the woman's ID and driver's license. She looked at the name Pamela Eiley. She was indeed the famous Poison Ivy. She was a female university student who loved plants and graduated from the elite Gotham University. She was an optimistic and kind person who was injected with plant toxins as an experiment subject. After surviving the disaster, her blood turned into chlorophyll, and she had the ability to control plants and secrete hormones to control others. However, Thea carefully observed the condition of her body. She was really far from surviving the disaster. If there was no external force, she would be dead. After experiencing many similar incidents, Thea was somewhat immune to them. Perhaps her existence was the only explanation for her survival. Poison Ivy's abilities were outstanding, and she was also very beautiful. She would be an excellent subordinate, worthy of Thea's personal attention. Thea didn't know how to explain the god's blood to Tommy. She decided to save the people first. After finding an empty room, Thea used her spiritual power to support her and kicked the door open. After a thorough examination, Thea frowned. The reason for Pamela's death was that the plant's vitality was too strong. Too much nutrients was taken in per unit of time, and the body couldn't absorb and convert them, so it could only store them. However, there was a limit to this. Pamela's body was currently at a critical point, and it wouldn't take much more. In another minute, her body would explode from too much energy. Thea took out her magic sword and tested it. The result was bad. Pamela's energy wasn't magic or divine power, but vitality. The magic sword had no effect on it. She lowered her head and thought about all the spells she knew, but none of them worked. If she used light magic, it would definitely add fuel to the fire. Pamela would explode in 3 seconds. What should she do? Thea rubbed her chin. She was really stumped. Should she use dark magic to counteract the vitality of the plant's poison? That would take too much effort. Maybe this will work. Thea took out a small bottle from her space ring. This was the blood that the Court of Owls had taken from Solomon Grundy's heart. The blood had a very strong corrosive property. It was too different from Thea's power system, so she had kept it. She made a cut on Pamela's arm and used her spiritual power to wrap a drop of grey blood into her blood vessel. Suddenly encountering an enemy, the energy in Pamela's body began to fight back wildly, trying to expel the grey blood from her body. However, the grey blood wasn't weak either. It clashed with a large amount of green life energy and didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. However, there was too much green life energy. A tiger couldn't win against a pack of wolves. The grey blood finally ran out of energy and dissipated like gas. It's working. A third of the energy in Pamela's body was used up. Thea dripped the remaining 2 drops into her blood. Half an hour passed. Who are you? Her energy had been temporarily depleted. Although her body was still producing new energy, Pamela had already regained her consciousness. Seeing a stranger standing in front of her, even though she was scared to death, she had no strength left in her body and could only ask intermittently, "I'm the one who saved you. You still remember what happened, right? If it wasn't for me, you'd be dead." Thea wasn't bluffing. Although there weren't many people in this world who knew how to heal, there were still a few. However, Thea was the only one who could heal her. "I remember. I want revenge," Pamela said through gritted teeth. "Very good. Keep it this way. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying, but I'll only say it once. Your body has been completely transformed by the previous poison. The time of your death has been artificially suppressed by me, but there's not much time left. You need a comprehensive transformation of your body to ensure that you won't die from the poison energy." Thea tried to use concise words to describe her current situation. "My body." Pamela forced herself to sit up. She looked at her 2 green arms. The wound Thea had made was still there, but it wasn't blood that flowed out. Instead, it was a green substance. "Chlorophyll? Where's my blood? I've become a monster." Pamela covered her mouth. She wanted to cry, but there weren't any tears. "My tear ducts are gone. Am I still human?" Faced with her question, Thea thought seriously. "I don't know much about biology, but from a biological point of view, you're a plant that can walk. However, from a philosophical point of view, if you still believe in the concept of human, then you're still human." Thea's first half of the sentence made Pamela's expression turn ugly, but the second half lifted her spirits. "Why did you save me?" Pamela asked in a low voice. "I saw your ability." Thea's answer was very honest. This made Pamela feel much better. American society didn't encourage selfless help. Gotham's motto was that useless people were only fit to lie in the gutter. Although Pamela was kind, she wasn't stupid. Hearing that her ability had been chosen, she secretly sighed in relief. How do you do this modification? Will it change my body? Thea took out a fake yellow ring. The modification process varies from person to person. During the modification, it will read your true thoughts and strengthen you accordingly. If you're desperate to return to your human form, perhaps my ring is your only choice. Chapter 338. I accept. It suits me very well. I'm willing to dedicate the rest of my life to it. Thea's words gave Pamela hope again. I don't need you to dedicate the rest of your life. I won't have many missions. You'll gain the power to take revenge. The rest of the time will still be yours. You can continue to grow flowers and plants. Thea was satisfied with her attitude. This girl was much more straightforward than Death Knell. With a light tap of her finger, the yellow ring flew in front of Pamela, emitting a faint light. She reached out and picked up the ring. When she put it on her middle finger, a faint yellow light surrounded Pamela. Thea casually cast a concealment spell. After Damien's teaching mission, Batman would definitely be running around. Barbara's raptor squad would also be roaming around the city. To prevent them from asking questions, it was best to avoid them. The power of the fake lantern ring was definitely not as good as the original, and the transformation process would take several times longer. Pamela was bathed in the yellow light. Although the transformation process was slow, it was done in an orderly manner. Thea was relieved and went to the rooftop to absorb the moonlight. The transformation process lasted for more than 4 hours. It was only in the wee hours of the morning that Pamela's transformation was finally completed. Thea looked at Pamela's ability through her own ring. Most of the emotional power had been used to restore her human form. Her originally green skin had returned to normal. That's right, it looked normal. The transformation of a life form could not be reversed. The lantern ring's power could only restore the color of her skin. Other than her lips and eyes, which were still slightly green, the rest of her body had returned to normal. The only ability Pamela had gained through the yellow ring was the ability to summon plants from somewhere on Earth. These plants had to be ones that she understood and had even cultivated before. In theory, if she could find a powerful plant from another planet and transplant it to Earth, she would be able to summon it after some cultivation. This summoning ability did not seem like much, but it did make up for the shortcomings of poison ivy in the original timeline. Her disadvantage from the environment in battle was greatly reduced. Thea left her a message, telling her to take revenge as she wished, but not to kill the innocent. She then left Earth and flew to the planet where Jared had been placed. Death Knell had already found the location of the shark god. To be safe, Thea felt that it was better to bring along the powerful Grood. At that time, Deadman, Gruder, Death Knell, Poison Ivy, and Thea would form a team of 5. It shouldn't be a problem for them to take down the native Hawaiian god who was taken down by a dozen agents, right? Once again, he found Jared. He had grown from 2 meters to 3 meters. His original hostility had completely disappeared. He was lying on a big rock, surrounded by a few native aliens who had evolved from insects. They were fanning him with big leaves. Thea casually took out a banana from her interspatial ring and threw it without even looking at it. Pa! It hit Jared's face. Jared doesn't like bananas. The gorilla had a conditioned reflex after being smashed by Thea. It knew that she was here as soon as it saw the banana. Its dull voice sounded in Thea's heart. How is it? Are you having fun here? Thea's psionic ability had been given a big gift by the Martian hunter. It had evolved from the original rough type to the delicate type. The basic function of psionic transmission was no longer as difficult as before. These guys are too stupid. Jared looked at the natives who were still fanning him with disgust. Thea looked around. The natives really couldn't think of how to serve this murderous god who had descended from the sky. Fortunately, Jared's hostility dissipated very quickly, and he slowly accepted their submission. These guys racked their brains to please Jared, but unfortunately, their intelligence was too low. They only used the same few methods, which made Jared feel suffocated. "Let's go. I'll take you to a more advanced planet. You'll gain more power there." Thea was very confident in Jared. After all, he was a famous villain in the original spacetime. No matter how high Sinisto's standards were, Jared would be able to move him. Sinisto had been moving frequently recently, secretly accumulating power. He had already left OUA and returned to his home planet, Karuga. Thea first released the elk from the dimensional ring to meet Jared. The two animals were quite congenial. They were both from Earth and had telepathy. This gave them a good first impression of each other. Then, under the ecstatic gaze of the natives, she put Jared into the dimensional ring. Thea flew into space, opened a wormhole, and flew into the depths of the universe. "Welcome to Karuga. What do you think of my kingdom?" At this time, Sinisto was in high spirits. He had changed out of the Green Lantern uniform that he had worn for many years and was now a Yellow Lantern. Thea knew that this guy still chose to go down this path. She knew that her little wings could not reach such a distant universe. Sinisto had not been stripped of his Green Lantern ring yet, but he was about to part ways with the Green Lantern Corps. It was only a matter of time before she played a role in it. "It's a very good place. Are you implementing your order?" Thea's eyes swept across the crowd. Sinisto relied on his strong willpower to control the Yellow Lantern ring. He used the power of the ring to maintain the order of the planet and monitor everyone's movements and heartbeat. He wanted to give his people an ideal world, but the reality was that his people were afraid of him. His Yellow Lantern ring's energy was increasing every day, and Thea's ring's energy had also increased by a lot. "A perfect order is the cornerstone of the stability of the people's lives," Sinisto said proudly. Thea was too lazy to explain the key point. He might or might not know, but it had nothing to do with Thea. Naturally, she would have Hal Jordan, an old enemy, to deal with him. When Sinisto died, the two lantern rings of the same origin would merge into one. At that time, the winner would be Thea. Thea did not want to talk nonsense at the crucial time of his rebellion. "I've just recruited a new subordinate. Can you give him some advice?" The two skipped over the problem of governing the country. Thea talked about the purpose of this trip. This was something they had agreed on before. Thea had 3 recruitment quotas. "The one that caught your eye must be this." "What is this?" Sinisto was shocked by Jared, who was released from the dimensional ring. There were many strange creatures in the universe, and some were 100 times stranger than Jared. However, Sinisto had recently crammed a lot of biological knowledge on Earth and suspected that he had seen wrongly. He used the lantern ring's identification function to scan Jared again. F***CK. A real gorilla. In the scientific classification of Earth, it was a primate mammal. Sinisto's face darkened. He pointed at Jared and said to Thea, "This guy is your new subordinate." "Are you kidding me? Last time, you got a dead person. This time, you got an animal. If you don't give me a reasonable explanation, I won't agree." Chapter 339. I'm Jared, not an animal, you purple-skinned eggplant. Before Sinisto could finish his complaint, an unusually dull voice sounded in his mind. He could not help but look at Jared. Was it this gorilla who spoke? Yes, Jared has a very strong telepathic ability. Thea did not hear Jared's words, but she could guess it from Sinisto's expression. Telepathic ability. Sinisto was ambitious and wise. He did not care about the purple-skinned eggplant's words. He was measuring the strength of this ability. Originally, Sinisto thought that Grood, who was 3 meters tall and weighed several tons, was a melee fighter. However, he did not expect him to be a psychic. There were many races in the universe that could control their minds. Sinisto had seen many of them, but most of them were physically weak. It was rare to see a psychic with a body as big as Grood. Jared's 2 huge nostrils snorted with dissatisfaction. Sinisto asked Thea, "How strong is his psychic control?" Thea looked at the people around Sinisto. She had met Lisa Dracker last time. Amorn Sum was Abin Sum's son. She had met him a few times before. This guy had also been tricked into the yellow lamp. She did not know the other two. One was shrouded in black fog, and the other was an alien woman with sharp teeth. Unsurprisingly, this guy covered in black fog was a weapon master. He was a life form from the antimatter universe. His strength was a little unpredictable. Sia aimed at the woman with sharp teeth and gave Jared a telepathic signal. Jared's psychic control was silent. There was no explosion or fire. The red-haired woman with sharp teeth walked slowly to Thea. "Karu Hill, are you okay? Answer me," Senisto shouted, but his subordinate had been completely controlled. He slowly said, "I'm Jared." "Are you kidding me? How could he be controlled so easily?" Senisto could not believe it, but the truth was in front of him. He had realized that this gorilla was very different from the gorillas in the database of the lamp ring. In fact, Jared's psychic control could work on Senisto, but Thea did not want to break his confidence. The users of the lamp ring had high requirements for their mentality. Without a perfect mentality, Senisto would not be able to rebel. The lamp rings of the same color could attack, but Thea and his ring were the same. They could never attack each other. The judgment of the ring was very strict. Any subjective intention would make the lamp ring of the deceased find another way. That was why both of them did not fight each other even though they had ulterior motives. Sia's plan was to not obstruct him, or even support him in his rebellion. She would let him and Hal Jordan love and kill each other. Regardless of whether Senisto died in battle or returned to the green light, the two rings would become one again. He gestured to Grood to release the mind control on the fanged woman, Karu Hill. It only took a second for the fanged woman's eyes to turn from confusion to fear. "What did you do to me?" Although she was questioning him, she didn't stop and quickly ran back to Senisto's side. Senisto nodded silently. "There are so many strange creatures on Earth. Jared can join the Yellow Lantern Corps. He will fight for me, right?" "Of course, but he has to go back to Earth with me first. After that, he will stay here with you." Thea smiled happily. Jared's psychic control was a combination of her initial suggestion and his skyrocketing psychic power. As long as his psychic power was still there, his loyalty could be guaranteed. Thea did not want him to stay on Earth. She wanted him to see more life in the universe. Jared would not think that he was different. The two finalized the agreement. Senisto gave Jared a new lamp ring, and Thea recorded the names of these people in the Book of Parallax. Jared, who wore the lamp ring, did not wear a tight-fitting combat suit. Instead, it had shoulder pads and arm guards like a suit of armor. This armored gorilla looked a bit like Vegeta's giant ape transformation. Thea was a little speechless. However, Jared's materialization ability disappointed her a little. His brain was too small, and his imagination was not enough. The things he materialized were things like scalpels, electric drills, and the like. There were also 2 bananas among them. She decided to explore his brain in the future. Thea had completed her trip. Jared had transitioned from an Earth creature to a universe creature. As long as he wanted to enhance his materialization ability, he had to see more and think more. His knowledge and vision would gradually expand, and this process would also reduce his hatred for humans. After bidding farewell to Senisto and the others, Thea returned to Earth with Jared. Death Knell had already sent a message back to the shark god. This was not a righteous action. Thea did not call Diana. Instead, she called back the dead people who were playing in the outer space and was ready to fight with them. "How was it? Did you get your revenge?" Thea first went to Poison Ivy's residence. At this time, Poison Ivy was sitting alone in front of the window, hugging her knees and spacing out. Pamela did not answer Thea's question. Her voice was a little hoarse. "The school cancelled my student status. They actually thought I was dead. Hee hee." She was obviously laughing, but there was no joy in her words. Thea did not know how to comfort her. Pamela habitually wiped her face twice, but there were still no traces of tears. "What do you need me to do?" "I want to help you expand your worldview. I want you to see how narrow your world was before. Change your clothes and come with me." Pamela was a little skeptical, but the hinting spell made her believe Thea's words. She changed her clothes and followed. Thea sensed Death Nell's location and opened a blue portal in a place where no one was around. The two walked in. After seeing the charm which used the portal so many times, Thea summarized her spatial knowledge. The portal could not be too big. If it was too big, it would waste magic. If it was too small, it would be uncomfortable. Thea could not open a portal at will, but she could cast a spell in advance to open a safe and comfortable portal. This little girl is the helper you found to slay the god. Death Nell, who was wearing a standard combat suit and carrying 2 swords, asked. Thea had been wearing a mask, so he could only tell that Thea was a woman. He did not know anything else. However, Pamela did not hide her face at all. She was dressed like a modern university student. Plus, she was still dizzy after being teleported. In Death Nell's eyes, she looked a little dumb. Everyone has a time when they are young and inexperienced. You weren't much better than her when you first started, right? She has a lot of potential. Thea casually explained. Poison Ivy's future was not ordinary. Thea was ready to give the task of training her to Slade. Didn't he like to be arrogant and call everyone a child? Let him train Poison Ivy slowly. Chapter 340. Death Nell did not think that a student like Pamela would be of any help. In his eyes, Pamela was not even comparable to Oliver from Purgatory Island. At least Oliver was an adult male. I've been on this island for a day. You said there were 2 more helpers. Where are they? Death Nell did not want to dwell on Pamela's problem. He only wanted to see what the god Thea mentioned was. Thea looked to the left of Death Nell's head. Boston Brand was wearing a red tights and was making a face. She was speechless. He's here. Boston, bring the light ring and let them know each other. Thea said. The dead man's physical body was in perfect condition. He could be seen and speak. Without the light ring, even if Thea cast true vision on them, they could only see and not communicate. Seeing a person appear above his head, Death Nell instinctively pulled out his sword. Who's there? Thea did not answer immediately. Instead, she called out Jared from the space ring and introduced him to her subordinates. A dead man and a gorilla? Poison Ivy felt that her worldview was shattered. She fell into a daze for a moment. Death Nell, Slade, was much better than her. With suspicion in his eyes, he pointed at the dead man and asked, You said this guy is dead? He's in a spirit state now? Thea corrected him. He's in a spirit state. He's the only unique life form in the world that exists between life and death. Everything else you said is correct. Slade pointed at Jared and asked, Is this a gorilla with superpowers? Before Thea could answer, Jared extended his hand and telepathically spoke in his mind. Jared likes the smell of blood on you. Slade shook hands with the gorilla in a daze. He finally got to know his weird teammate. At this moment, Poison Ivy and the dead man chimed in. Are you really Boston Brand? My classmates and I have seen your trapeze performance. Boston Brand was very experienced in dealing with such girls. With him returning to Earth and meeting Pamela, a fellow Gotham native, he began chatting with her. Thea had been observing them. Generally speaking, Slade and Gruder got along quite well. Dead Man and Poison Ivy could also get along well. Thea was not afraid that they would unite and betray her. She wanted to keep them united, but not too united. All right, now that we know each other, Death Nell, tell them about the mission. Thea interrupted their conversation. Richard quickly pulled his hand out of the gorilla's grasp. Shaking hands and chatting with a gorilla was a strange experience that he would never have imagined 10 minutes ago. Despite the fact that this gorilla was well-spoken, knowledgeable, and agreed with many of his views, Richard did not know whether to laugh or cry. A gorilla had praised him and agreed with him. What expression should he make? He cleared his throat. Everyone, our current location is about 80 nautical miles away from the main island of Hawaii. This island is not even marked on the military map. I suspect that there is some kind of strong magnetic field around the island. This island is not empty. On the contrary, there are a few villages of primitive people. They don't know about the changes in the outside world, and they don't know how small the space they are in is. They think that this island is the entire world. Our target is the god they worship. It's the shark god in Hawaii's legends. That's all I know. Well done. It was not easy to gather so much information in such a short time. Thea was not stingy with her praise. Although this god is a god in name, according to my calculations, it should be the weakest level. Divine power is proportional to faith. You may know about the Greek and Norse gods, but have you heard of the Hawaiian gods? Thea was afraid that they would have doubts, so she helped to dispel their doubts. Death Knell was not afraid of anything. He would do anything as long as he had money. Gruder also did not care about the human gods. Not to mention the dead. He was already dead, so who could do anything to him? Only Poison Ivy was still a little afraid. However, seeing that the others did not care, her courage increased. What's the exact location of the target? Thea asked Death Knell. I couldn't get anything out of the language barrier. Death Knell was a little embarrassed. Thea did not comment. The light ring could translate languages, but the language of the hundreds of natives was too primitive, so the light ring did not record it. Due to the language barrier, no matter how good Slade's interrogation skills were, it was useless. He opened the Eye of Horus and quickly found a native with leaves around his waist. He used the Martian hunter's super long-distance mind-reading ability to skip the language barrier and read his thoughts directly. After 2 minutes, Thea cut off the connection and pointed to the west side of the island. This way. The few of them walked along a winding path to the depths of the island. The path was slightly repaired, but the natives' tools were too crude. Usually, no one would walk here, so it still looked very desolate. Are there really gods in this world? Poison Ivy whispered to the dead man floating beside her. There should be. After all, a person like me who is neither dead nor alive exists. It should be reasonable for there to be a few gods, the dead man whispered back. Poison Ivy mumbled something that no one could hear clearly and followed the few of them. Along the way, Thea did not dare to use the Eye of Horus to investigate directly. She could only adjust the route according to the native's memory. This is it. I can already feel the trace of divine power, but it's very weak. Thea led the few of them to the entrance of a huge cave. She was not comforting them, but she felt that the divine power was very weak. Not to mention Diana, it was even weaker than Thea's. Be alert. The enemy has discovered us. Initially, Sia wanted to launch a sneak attack, but she had forgotten that Grood was a big guy. His heavy body made a loud thud as he walked on the road. Unless the guy inside was deaf, it was impossible for him not to notice it. Slade immediately pulled out 2 swords, and a handgun hovered behind him. Poison Ivy was a little nervous. She reflexively summoned a large number of plants. The green plants were under her control, and they grew very fast. In a few seconds, they covered the entire cave. Who dares to disturb the great shark god Kamal? Have you thought about how you will die? Now kneel down and beg for my forgiveness. I can spare you a painful death. Kneel down. Accept this great mercy. In the depths of the cave, a figure sat on a tall stone chair. There were static electricity lingering around the body. With the help of the weak light, they could see that it was a blue giant. The giant had a very anthropomorphic head. There were a few fin-like wrinkles on the top of the head, gills behind the ears, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He looked at the intruders aggressively. Chapter 341. The giant itself was more than 3 meters tall, and it was sitting at the highest point in the cave. It looked down at them from above. When it saw that they didn't kneel down while trembling like the natives, it was a little annoyed. It slowly stood up. Its blue body was engraved with many unknown patterns. It was from these patterns that the static electricity was emitted, which prevented the cave from being completely dark. Your sad fate has long been decided, you. The giant stood up, but it did not immediately attack. It waved its huge arms, and those who did not know it would think that it was giving a speech. Cut the crap. Kill it. Thea had been observing since she entered the cave. Combined with the glorious history of the original spacetime where this guy was taken down by Amanda's agents, she did not think that this guy was strong. Listening to it talking nonsense, she was annoyed. She was too lazy to guess its ability, so she threw out a chain to bind the giant's feet. Thea did not think too much. She did not know the opponent's ability, so she decided to limit its speed first. After all, there were 3 people on her side, 1 dead man and 1 gorilla. None of them were meat shields that could withstand damage. Gertrude looked big, but in fact, strictly speaking, it was a magician. So, it was a safe way to fight with long-range attacks. The first to respond to her order was Poison Ivy. She controlled countless plants, and she was only a second slower than Thea. The plants that covered the sky and the earth wrapped the giant tightly. Some of the plants that looked very strange even spewed out purple and red gas. Poison Ivy's starting point was a little high. She did not care about the damage of the plants at all. All kinds of toxins were sprayed out. There were neurological, blood-soluble, paralyzing, hallucinogenic, and many other plant characteristics that she was not familiar with. They were all thrown on the giant's face. The originally blue and majestic face was sprayed green. The giant's face showed an angry expression, but it fell into a sluggish state. Gertrude's mind control followed. The dead man's movement was slightly slower. It instantly cast a fear spell and then directly occupied the giant's body. The giant's legs were bound by chains, and its upper body was tied tightly by plants. In the spiritual world, Gertrude was desperately trying to control it, and the dead man was also trying to squeeze into its body. Fear was disintegrating its resistance, and the plant toxins were paralyzing its body. Its spiritual resistance was getting weaker and weaker. F***CK. Thea was a little dumbfounded. Her team was very strong. Each of them had a control skill, and this arrogant guy couldn't even fight back. However, they lacked meat shields and characters with high attack power. They would need to work on these in the future. Speaking of which, I don't have to go up, do I? Holding 2 long swords, Richard looked in the direction of the giant with lingering fear. Poison Vine Lady was still controlling the plants to spray poison. The air was suffused with a green color. No matter how he looked at it, the gas didn't seem to have the effect of strengthening the body. Poison Vine Lady, stop spraying. Thea hurriedly stopped Poison Ivy, who was a little excited. Even though she had eaten the fruit of the earth, she was not completely immune to these messy gases, let alone Slade and Grood. This was not a game, and they could not ignore the damage from their teammates. Huff! Huff! Poison Vine Lady quickly stopped. This round of fierce spraying was a big burden on her body. She stopped attacking, put her hands on her knees, and gasped for breath. Thea stood still and watched. She didn't care about the absorption process of the demon sword. It would be troublesome if she absorbed the Poison Vine Lady's toxins. She waited for a while until the giant's body turned from green to blue. Thea knew that this was the body's instinctive reaction. The giant's soul was being controlled, but the body's instincts were rejecting the plant toxins. Here's my chance. Thea took out the demon's sword and rushed up with big steps. The demon's sword was unsheathed, and a ray of light flashed in the dark cave. The sword's spine was suffused with a faint red light. It could feel part of Thea's intention. It was also very excited about being able to taste God's blood. With a muffled sound, the demon's sword went straight into the giant's heart. Only this much God power. Thea used her heart to feel the God power transmitted by the demon's sword. It was small, weak, and intermittent. She was very dissatisfied. She pulled out the demon's sword and stabbed it 3 times in a row. The dark blue, fist-sized God power stopped in her body like a ball of water. Weakling. Thea stabbed it for the 5th time. She couldn't absorb anything anymore. She turned to look at Jared. The gorilla rubbed his chin, and his voice was transmitted to her heart. This guy's soul realm has either suddenly increased greatly and resisted my mind control, or he's dead. The dead man floated out as well. This guy should be dead. Even his soul has dissipated. Too weak. Thea could only come to this conclusion. Maybe this guy's strength and speed were enhanced, but it couldn't be that strong. He was shouting so fiercely. Maybe he was a strong braggart. My subordinate reported that the agents of the Heaven's Eye Society have arrived at the American base in Hawaii. Richard picked up a phone call. He felt that he didn't help much in the battle, so he reported in a slightly obsequious manner. Thea carefully felt the god power extracted. She didn't know if she could extract water element magic from it. But since the Heaven's Eye Society was here, they could only retreat. Erase all traces of our battle. Death Knell, you're a top-notch investigation master. Go and take care of it. Actually, there wasn't any fierce battle here. The other party died before he could even make a move. The key was that poison ivy had too many plants. Many of them were obviously not from Hawaii. They had to clean them up. After instructing Death Knell and Poison Ivy to clean up the traces outside and inside the cave, Thea instructed Jared and the dead man to search for any good items nearby. She focused on dealing with the shark god's corpse. TSK, he looks quite big. Why is he so useless? Thea turned the corpse over and over for a long time. The patterns on this guy's body could be studied, but other than that, there was no other value. Horus was a second-rate god, but this guy wasn't even a second-rate god. Take it back. If there's no other way, chop it up and feed it to the elk and heifers. Thea couldn't think of any use for this corpse. She awkwardly kept it in her space ring. I've caught a captive. But this guy's intelligence is very low. Jared's voice sounded. He walked over with a murloc that was less than a meter tall. The murloc had a shark head and a human body. It trembled as it looked at the intruders. Thea observed it with the eye of Horus. This guy also had some god power in his body, but it was weaker than the guy who died just now. Was this the future Shark King of the Suicide Squad? From an ordinary person's point of view, it would be quite powerful when it grew up. It would be a pity to kill it now. This thing's intelligence wasn't high. It would be good to keep it as a guard. Thea waved her hand. Take it away. Chapter 342. Even when Shark King was young, it was not good to look at. Sia could not bring it back to Quinn's Manor to raise it. After Death Knell cleaned up the traces on the island, he handed over the task of training Poison Vine Lady and raising Shark King to him. Death Knell had seen Poison Ivy's power, so he wasn't too against this task. Thea softly chanted a spell, and a small dust spell fell into the cave. From the outside, it looked like a deserted cave. She nodded, opened a portal, and left the island. Poison Ivy and Death Knell went to train, and the dead people were left for him to play with. Grood was responsible for returning to the Yellow Lantern Corps to keep track of Sinisto's progress. Thea's request was for him to learn more and watch more, and just slack off in battle. Thea went back to Star City alone. She wanted to absorb the divine power and use it to increase the water attribute magic in her body. The process of creating something from nothing required a lot of divine power. Thea absorbed it slowly without sleep for 3 days before finally forming a weak water attribute magic in her body. It's not easy. After 3 days without rest, Thea's body was damp all the time. She took a bath happily and was now wiping her hair with a towel. The shark god was too weak. He didn't have much divine power left after transforming his body. Thea barely managed to replenish the water attribute, but the entire divine power was exhausted. In order to achieve a balance between the attributes, Thea converted a small part of the other 4 attributes into the water attribute. The water attribute didn't have high attack power and healing effects, but it had good compatibility. Thea had been studying the hybrid magic since a long time ago, and she could finally use it. The lightning breath when she instantiated Diawolo could be said to be her strongest attack now. But the process of instantiating, controlling, mixing the energy, and spitting it out was too long. Few brainless villains would wait and watch the whole process without attacking in advance. Moreover, this demon image really had nothing to do with justice. Sia had been thinking about whether there was an alternative. With reference to Zeus's lightning arrow and her lightning breath, Sia finally found the right direction for her future development, which was a combination of fire, wind, and water lightning spells. Strong attack power, fast speed, and it looked very righteous. Thea's magic power had already surpassed the limits of the Constantine family's books. She was on her own path. Thea, let me introduce you. This is John Digel. He's very skilled and is completely qualified to be your bodyguard. He served in Afghanistan in the same year as me. He's also my. Lila Michaels, who was wearing a black suit, introduced the black man beside her to Thea. He's also your husband, isn't he? Thea was a little speechless at this mature woman who didn't shy away from her in-laws. As she had more and more work to do, especially entering the medical industry this time, it would cause countless people to lose their jobs. There had already been 2 small-scale kidnappings and assassinations this month. Although the movements of these people were as slow as snails in her eyes, and even if bullets hit them, they would not be able to break through their defenses. However, she could not stand the annoyance. Every time, he had to put on a show and use all kinds of coincidences to get rid of his opponent. It was really troublesome. That was why she came up with the idea on the spur of the moment, hoping that the Heavenly Eye Society would provide some retired agents or something to decorate the shop. She did not expect it at all. Lila actually pulled her husband, who was idle at home and was a house husband, out. She knew Thea's strength. If this job was really dangerous, who knew who would be the one protecting who? Of course, in all fairness, John Deagle's skills were not bad. As the future Iron Triangle of the Green Arrow team, he had been verified by history. In fact, Lila also had a mental struggle. Her husband stayed at home every day, washing clothes and cooking. It was easy to affect a man's mind. Her job in the Heavenly Eye Society was not suitable for the straightforward Digel. Coincidentally, Thea mentioned this to Amanda. Lila very firmly took on the task. Amanda could not possibly refute her assistant's face over such a small matter, so she agreed without much thought. However, Lila did not tell her husband about Thea's strength. Digel had a strong self-esteem. If he knew that he was just a freeloader who could do without him, he would definitely resign. Such a high-paying and safe job as a bodyguard was rare in the world. At least with Lila's knowledge, there were not many people on Earth who were more powerful than Thea. As for her husband cheating on her, she did not have to worry. Although Thea and Diana appeared and disappeared mysteriously, the Heavenly Eye Society still had some information. It was not difficult to analyze the relationship between the two. Her husband was as black as charcoal, so he was very safe. Welcome, Mr. Digel. If you don't have anything else, from today onwards, you will be in charge of my personal security work. Thea could roughly guess Lila's intention, but there was no need to say it out loud. She herself wanted to hide it, and the Heavenly Eye Society did not want to create any large-scale supernatural phenomenon. It was a good idea to keep all kinds of clowns at the level of ordinary people. I'll start work today. The black man had been idling at home for more than a year. He did not know Thea's strength. He only felt that time was tight and the task was important. He immediately gathered a few bodyguards from the Quinn family and gave them the task. Is that your husband? Thea only asked Lila softly when the black man disappeared from her sight. Ha ha. Yes, yes. Lila laughed dryly. She was a little embarrassed to take her salary so openly. Thea did not mind. She just felt that her butterfly wings were getting bigger and bigger. John Digel came to the Quinn family to be their bodyguard. What a strange fate. In the next few days, the black man carried out his duties seriously. He recruited a few more bodyguards and set up a thorough protection plan. Needless to say, he really caught an attacker and realized his personal value. The black man became even more high-spirited. Unlike how he protected Olivier in the original timeline, Thea was a woman after all. He could not protect her 24/7. However, Thea did not run all over the city like Olivier. Overall, it could be said that both the host and the guest enjoyed themselves. Thea's secret base. This is artificial intelligence. The person who exclaimed was naturally Miss Felicity Smoker, who had just returned from a business trip to Detroit's Red House. At first, she thought that Thea was joking. Artificial intelligence? You must be kidding me. How could such a sci-fi thing exist in reality? However, when the 3D projection of Gideon greeted her, the former hacker was completely stunned. Fortunately, the secret base was deep underground and had good soundproofing. Her scream did not attract anyone's attention. Is it really artificial intelligence? After receiving Thea's confirmation, Felicity's eyes widened. She was afraid that her eyes were playing tricks on her, so she used her hand to check the 3D projection of Gideon. Finally, she confirmed that she was not hallucinating. The thing from the movie was right before her eyes. Chapter 343. Is this also an extraterrestrial product? Felicity, who had seen the world in the Red House, could not help but think. Thea did not answer this question. She needed Felicity's computer knowledge to strengthen Gideon, or rather, to limit the artificial intelligence. Countless movies and TV shows had shown that an unrestricted artificial intelligence would bring disaster to mankind. Gideon on the spaceship Waverider had even evolved emotions, so Thea had to be careful. I'll have to study it carefully. Thea ordered Gideon to show her the source code. Felicity's eyes lit up after reading 2 lines. Then, she ignored Thea and started typing on several machines alone. The former hacker lady had been researching for a whole day. Thea had to ask her to stop because she was so focused that she forgot to eat and sleep. If Thea ignored her, she would starve to death. Miss Felicity was so excited that she poured out all of her research findings the moment they met. Thea was confused by the algorithms and logical relationships that she talked about. Anyway, Gideon was synonymous with perfection and refinement in her mouth. When do you think we can start designing the mechanical armor? Thea did not care about the construction of the artificial intelligence, as long as it did not rebel. Now. Felicity was still eating something in her mouth and said a little unclearly. Then let's get started. The design of the Iron Man armor was not too difficult. With the Atom suit as the foundation, it was coupled with the new energy source developed by the Quinn Corporation. After the research of dozens of researchers from the Quinn Group, the white dwarf fragment, which is 1 cubic centimeter in size, weighs 1 ton. This small piece of output design is reasonable and can provide electricity for a large city with a population of millions for several years. This huge energy body can completely provide energy for the power of the Iron Man armor. Atomic Knight Ray Palmer had only acquired the new energy technology after merging with the Quinn Group. His battle suit was initially powered by a white dwarf. Unfortunately, the high-density and high-temperature stellar fragments were extremely unstable, and the violent explosions had accidentally caused his atomization. Thea did not need to follow in his footsteps. The Red House laboratory had the product she needed. The white dwarf star stabilizer was the size of a small box. It could be placed inside the armor and could steadily output the energy of the white dwarf. If the enemy was difficult to deal with, the white dwarf star stabilizer could be released and the white dwarf star stabilizer could operate at 200% or even 300% for a minute. It could be said that the aliens were more than a generation ahead of Earth in terms of energy usage. Thea had built the most advanced workshop in the secret base. The AI drew the blueprints, and the mechanical arms completed the work. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Her life gradually got back on track. The affairs of the group were handed over to the CEOs to handle. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, she studied the magic of feudal superstition. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, she studied modern science and manufacturing mechanical armor. In her spare time, she taught Damien, and on weekends, she played around the world with Diana. Her days were happy and fulfilling. While she was happy, there were naturally people who were unhappy. With the launch of the medical pod, a large number of medical workers were impacted. Originally, they could live a leisurely day by performing 2 surgeries a day. Now that the medical pod was on the market, they could perform a surgery in 10 minutes, and the patients could go home in 2 hours. It was more than 10 times more efficient than before. The Medical Practitioners Union, the Trauma Healing Union, the Nurses Union, the Attending Physician Union, and a bunch of other unions that Thea had never heard of responded. A group of people marched, demonstrated, and launched petitions. In the end, when they saw that no one in the Quinn Group took them seriously, they filed an appeal to the federal court in a fit of anger. Under the system of separation of powers, for some reason, the court accepted the appeal. Thea, who was still developing her own weapon system, had no choice but to participate in the preliminary review. "Miss Quinn, don't be nervous. You don't have to say anything. This was the big brother of the bodyguard, Digger, who did not know the truth. Thea, this is a small problem. Don't get agitated. This was the Heaven's Eye Society's Lara Michaels, who believed that she knew her strength. Calm down. You must calm down. The one who said this was the Martian hunter, who was pretending to be the director of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. He was afraid that Thea would go all out in anger. Because of his fear of fire, he could not stop Thea at all. The words of the three people sounded similar on the surface, but in reality, there was a big difference. Thea's mentality was now very detached. These people who were holding slogans and protesting loudly were zero threat to her. If she cast a large-scale fear spell on them, 80% of these people would wet their pants. She glanced at the Martian hunter from the corner of her eyes. This guy had been on guard all this time. Hey, who organized these people? Thea's question rang in his heart. I don't know. The Super Investigation Bureau and the Heaven's Eye Society did not receive any news. But if I'm not wrong, it should be Lex Luthor. The Martian hunter did not hide anything from her and told her his guess. Thea pursed her lips and did not say anything. Luthor was too controlling. He would never allow different voices to appear in his sphere of influence. He had waited until today to launch his attack. It was already too late. However, this move was just to test the government and the military's support for Thea. Only when he knew the bottom line could he continue with his next move. She had to create some trouble for him. Should she send Death Knell or Poison Ivy? Thea thought about it and decided that it would be better for Poison Ivy to do it. Luthor was also equipped with black technology. Death Knell had a high reputation. It would be troublesome if they were discovered. Thea did not say a word during the preliminary examination and the press conference until she left. That night, a supernatural incident occurred in Luthor's building. From time to time, there would be overtime employees who went berserk and beat up their supervisors. It was originally thought to be a single case, but there were 3 cases in 3 days. Even a fool would know that something was wrong. Did you do this? The Martian hunter stopped Thea early in the morning and stuffed a newspaper into her hands. Thea opened the newspaper and looked. Hey! It turned out to be the Daily Planet newspaper that did not match Luthor's. The entire front page of the newspaper was news of Luthor Group's crazy exploitation of workers. The writer was not Louise Lane, but the style of writing was more pungent. The Luthor Group in his writing was similar to a sweatshop. She denied the Martian hunter's accusation. Don't talk nonsense. You are a master of mind control. This is obviously not a mind control method. Thea made a disgusted expression. Poison Ivy's method came and went without a trace. Who would have thought that some plants could be so powerful? The Martian hunter naturally went to the scene to observe. He did not find any traces of mind control, but this made him even more confused. Who did this? Keep it under control. Don't let the situation escalate. He left these 2 sentences and hurried back to continue looking for clues. Chapter 344. Over the next few days, the media was abuzz. Today, they were saying that Quinn Corporation had forced a middle-class doctor to beg on the streets. The next day, they were saying that Luthor Corporation had driven several employees crazy by working overtime day and night. Both sides fought back and forth for a few rounds, maintaining a subtle bottom line, which was to test the waters without killing anyone. Just as several domestic analysts were casually analyzing the development of the situation, things suddenly calmed down. No one on the streets accused Thea anymore, and there were no more paranormal incidents in Luthor Corporation. Things were just like the beginning, appearing suddenly and disappearing quickly from everyone's sight. Thea did not participate too much in this matter, because her armor had entered the final stage. Power system intact, propulsion system intact, auxiliary operating system intact. 3, 2, 1, start. In the secret base, Felicity carefully stared at the various indicators on the display screen. Thea stood in front of the left, and there were 4 mechanical arms in front of her, quickly helping her equip the iron armor that the 2 had worked hard to make for many days. Unlike the Iron Man next door, Thea had enough combat power. She just needed some strong defense, and did not need to make a fully enclosed armor. Her armor was not so much like the Iron Man's, but more like Dr. Destruction's. Traditional metals could not be perfectly integrated with magic. Thea thought for a while and finally took out the body of Kamal, the shark god. Disemboweling and chopping into pieces was not enough to describe her brutality. The inner layer of the armor was traditional metal, auxiliary operating system, and energy conduction system were in this layer. The outer layer was Kamal's bones. Although Kamal was weak, he was still a god, and his body still had good magic conduction. Thea engraved a large number of practical magic circles on this layer, such as strength, agility, endurance, and so on. These were all spells that could improve the overall performance of the armor. The outermost layer was made of hafnium metal, which could only be artificially synthesized. Its hardness, melting point, and quality were extremely high. Hafnium metal had the effect of resisting nuclear bombs, and considering several aspects, it was the most suitable material for Thea's armor. There was no need for a full-body armor like the Iron Man's, so naturally, there weren't so many places that needed to be tightened. The defense of the body's joints was lower, but the agility was much better than Tony Stark's straight punches and kicks. Thea was dressed very quickly. Shoulder pads, chest pads, arm pads, and leg pads were all equipped. She also wore a silver-white helmet on her head. The Eye of Horus crushed all detection equipment. There was no mask, but a mask would appear to cover her face during battle. The armor was silver-white in color, but there were red patterns on it. As a symbol for a long time in the future, a cape was a must. The two of them argued about the color of the cloak again. The cloak should be green, right? The green cloak and the silver armor seem like a good match. Felicity remembered the skateboard color battle that day and insisted on green. Thea was speechless. Silver armor and green cloak. Isn't that Professor Destruction? Would they cross dimensions and fight me to the death? He used the same words as before, saying that green was easily associated with decay and withering. It was a bunch of nonsense. In the end, Thea had the upper hand. The same color as the skateboard that day, a red cloak. After dressing up, there were a few tests to be done. The first test was strength. Even a child would understand the concept of strength defeating 10. Superman and Diana both relied on strength to crush their enemies. In the later stages of the game, Shazam and Black Adam were magic types, but they still fought with their fists every day. It could be seen that strength was a necessary attribute. 500 tons, 620 tons. 700 tons, 770 tons. The final strength was fixed at 850 tons, but this was only the result of 50% of the White Dwarf's power. If it was overloaded, it would not be a problem to break through 1,000 tons. The next test was speed. Thea flew with her magic power, and her speed was about 700 miles per hour. The yellow light ring was running at full power, and it could exceed Mach 2 in the atmosphere. However, it could not last long, and the emotional consumption would be very fast. The propulsion system of the Iron Man suit came from the Red House. Its full name was Rotating Core Power Amplifier. It converted the energy of the White Dwarf into propulsion. Its speed could be stable beyond the speed of sound, which was Mach 1. It did not look as good as the light ring, but it did not consume any energy. In addition, it had a strong defense and optical camouflage function. In terms of stealth and security, it was better than the light ring. Do you still want to test the weapon system? Thea avoided the satellites, flew a few laps around the vicinity, and returned to the secret base. Felicity asked. Let's try it. With the energy supply of the White Dwarf, the frost gun will definitely last longer. They didn't think too much about the weapon system and directly installed the freeze gun, one in each hand. Sia didn't like the white noise cannon in the Red House's laboratory. The cone-shaped sound wave attack had too little lethality. Dr. Sareth Stone covered it tightly. Those who didn't know would think that it was some powerful weapon. After installing the frost gun on the arm, the endurance and firing speed of the frost gun were improved. A 20-square-meter house could now be completely frozen in a second. When Thea's frost gun was used against the Charm Witch, It took half a minute to freeze the house. Before the test was completed, the two accidentally discovered a hidden attribute of the armor. The armor had excellent underwater combat performance. According to Gideon's calculations, the armor could reach a speed of 1,500 nautical miles per hour underwater. It could be said that the armor's speed underwater was faster than the speed in the sky. This was undoubtedly the effect of Kamal's corpse. Thea could not help but think that maybe this guy was not a weakling. From this little data, she could analyze that he might be very strong underwater. It should be known that the fastest underwater person in this world should be the superhero Poseidon. With the divine trident in his hand, his super swimming speed could reach 10,000 feet per second, which was more than 3,000 meters, which was nearly 6,000 nautical miles per hour. Sigh. Thea looked down at the remains of Kamal's corpse. This guy probably died with his eyes wide open. After being beaten by their control skills on land, he did not even have the chance to use his full strength until his death. If it were not for this armor, he would only be left with the title of trash. There was no end to the development of armor, especially when Thea felt that the first armor she had developed with great ambition was actually an underwater armor. This made her a little unhappy. How to quickly equip the armor was also a problem that needed to be solved urgently. The only thing Thea could think of was to use the magic absorption property to complete the armor quickly, but that should be considered for the next armor set. Her defense problem was temporarily solved. The only thing left was the safety of the people around her. Luther had ceased his activities, but the harassment did not stop. Thea instructed Diggle to protect the CEOs of the group. At the same time, she made a small frost gun for Felicity. If the bodyguards were unreliable, this gun would be very useful. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.